My father's voice was ice when he called after 2 years of silence. Family trip to the Caribbean, $1,500 per person. Be grateful we're even letting you come. I should have known better. But grief makes you stupid, and Mom's death left a hole I desperately wanted to fill with something resembling family. So I said yes. Big mistake. 3 days into paradise, I checked my bank account and felt my blood turn cold. Not $1,500, not $3,000. $1,400 had vanished overnight. Flight upgrades I never authorized, a luxury villa I never requested, spa treatments I never booked. All charged to my card while my golden child sister Madison posted Instagram stories thanking her amazing sister for this dream vacation. My father smiled at dinner, toasting my generosity in front of strangers. My sister beamed in her designer swimsuit. My brother looked away, ashamed but silent. They thought I'd stay quiet, play my role, be the family ATM like I'd always been. They were wrong. What they didn't know was that my mother, brilliant, beautiful mom, had left me one final gift before she died. A gift specifically designed for this moment. A weapon they never saw coming. By the time I was done, their credit cards were frozen, their secrets were exposed, and the golden family they'd built on my back was burning to ashes. This is the story of how I made them pay. Every single dollar. And trust me, what comes next is better than any revenge you've ever imagined. My name is Joanna Hunter. I'm 37 years old, a financial analyst at one of Manhattan's mid-tier investment firms. And for the past 2 years, I've been an orphan. At least that's how it felt after my mother died. My father and siblings were still technically alive, but we might as well have been strangers. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office overlooking the East River. The number flashed on my screen, and for a moment I genuinely didn't recognize it. When I finally placed it, Dad's cell phone, my finger hovered over the decline button. 2 years of silence, and now this. Against my better judgment, I answered. Joanna. Not a greeting. A statement. My father's voice had that same clipped, authoritative quality I remembered from childhood, the tone of a man who expected immediate compliance and never doubted he'd receive it. Dad, my voice came out more uncertain than I intended. I'm organizing a family trip, Caribbean, 2 weeks from now. Your brother and sister are coming. I expect you there as well. No, how are you? No acknowledgement of the time that had passed. No mention of the funeral where we'd barely spoken, or the months afterward when I'd tried God, how I'd tried to maintain some connection before finally accepting that he simply didn't want one. I'm not sure I can get the time off work. Make it happen. He cut me off smoothly the way he always did when he'd decided something. It's time this family healed. Your mother would have wanted this. There it was, the weapon he knew would cut deepest. My eyes drifted to the framed photograph on my desk, Mom at the beach, her salt and pepper hair blowing in the wind, her smile genuine and warm in a way Dad's never was. She'd been the glue holding our fractured family together, the one who made excuses for his coldness, who begged me to be patient with Madison's selfishness, who insisted David's weakness was just being diplomatic. She always hoped you'd be part of this family, Joanna. Really part of it, not just on the periphery where you've always kept yourself. The accusation in his words made my chest tighten, as if I'd been the one choosing distance. As if I hadn't spent my entire childhood trying to earn the approval that came so easily to my younger siblings. As if I hadn't achieved everything, the scholarship, the career, the independence, hoping that maybe finally it would be enough. I don't know, Dad. It's complicated. It's not complicated. His voice hardened. Family is family. You show up, you participate, or you continue down this path you've chosen, becoming more isolated, more bitter. Is that what Eleanor would have wanted for you? I hated how he used her name like that. Eleanor, not your mother. As if invoking her formally gave his words more weight, more authority. As if he had any idea what she actually would have wanted when he'd spent most of their marriage dismissing her opinions as too emotional or impractical. But the grief was still so raw. 2 years felt like 2 weeks when it came to losing her. The wound hadn't even begun to scar over, and he knew it. He'd always been skilled at finding weaknesses and exploiting them. It's what made him successful in business and toxic as a father. The trip is $1,500 per person. He continued, his tone shifting to something almost casual now that he sensed my resistance crumbling. Covers accommodation and most meals. You'll need to arrange your own flight, but I'll send you the resort details. $1,500. Not insignificant, but manageable for someone with my salary. Still, something about the way he mentioned it felt off, too casual, too throwaway, like an afterthought rather than important information. I'll think about it, I said, though we both knew what that meant. Don't think too long. I need final numbers by Friday. A pause, then. And Joanna? Be grateful we're even letting you come. After the way you've shut us out these past 2 years, you're lucky we're willing to give you another chance. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there for a long moment, phone still pressed to my ear, his words echoing in the empty space of my office. Be grateful we're even letting you come, as if family was a privilege I had to earn, as if I was the problem. My gaze returned to Mom's photograph. In my memory, I could hear her voice from one of our last conversations when she was already weak from the cancer, but still trying to mediate between me and the rest of them. Your father doesn't know how to show love, Joe. He only knows how to control. And your siblings learned from him. But you're different. You're strong. Was this strength agreeing to a trip I knew would be emotionally exhausting? Willingly walking back into a family dynamic that had spent 37 years making me feel inadequate? Or was it weakness, the desperate hope of a grieving daughter that maybe somehow things could be different? I picked up the photograph, running my thumb over the glass. What would you really want, Mom? I whispered. What would you tell me to do? The answer, of course, didn't come. The dead don't speak, and I was left alone with a decision I knew I'd already made the moment I answered the phone. I opened my laptop and pulled up my work calendar, scanning for a 2-week gap that wouldn't completely derail my projects. My assistant would have questions. My boss would be irritated. But I'd make it work because that's what I always did, bent myself into whatever shape was necessary to meet everyone else's expectations. As I typed an email requesting the time off, I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach. The same knot I'd felt at every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every milestone event where I was present but somehow never quite included. The knot that warned me I was making a mistake. But grief makes you ignore warnings. Grief makes you believe in possibilities that logic knows are impossible. I hit send on the email, then picked up my phone and texted my father a single word, yes. His response came immediately. Good. Details to follow. I set the phone down and looked again at my mother's photograph, her smile forever frozen in that moment of happiness that seemed so distant now. For you, Mom, I whispered to her image, feeling tears prick at my eyes. Only for you. I didn't know it then, but that decision, that single word of agreement, would lead me to the most devastating and liberating experience of my life. The trip would cost far more than $1,500. It would cost me everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and love. But it would also give me something I'd never had: freedom. The moment I agreed to the trip, I knew I'd have to tell my assistant Caroline, who would inevitably ask why I was voluntarily spending 2 weeks with a family I never mentioned. But before I could even begin that conversation, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, Hunter Family Caribbean Trip, Flight Confirmation. I hadn't booked a flight yet. My stomach dropped as I opened the email. There, in clean corporate formatting, was a detailed itinerary from a luxury travel agency. 4 first-class tickets to St. Lucia. Departure in 12 days. Total charge $1,400. Charged to my credit card. I stared at the screen, my vision tunneling as I scrolled through the breakdown. First class for Henry Hunter and Madison Hunter. Business class for David Hunter. And there at the bottom, almost as an afterthought, economy for Joanna Hunter. The seating chart even showed it visually: Dad and Madison in 1A and 1B, David in 7C, and me in 32F. The back of the plane middle seat next to the bathrooms. Of course. The pattern was so familiar it almost made me laugh. Almost. Because even after 37 years, even after building a successful career and a life completely independent of them, they still had the power to make me feel exactly like I did at 7 years old, watching Madison blow out candles on a 3-tiered princess cake, while my own birthday weeks earlier had been acknowledged with a store-bought sheet cake and a "sorry honey, we've been busy" from Mom. I was 12 when I finally understood that the inequality wasn't accidental. It was Madison's 8th birthday, and our parents had rented out an entire roller skating rink. There were 50 kids, a DJ, a catered buffet, and a gift table that looked like a small mountain. I'd helped Mom wrap the presents the night before, not Madison's gifts from others, but the ones from our parents. I'd counted 7 boxes, each one expensive and exactly what Madison had asked for. 3 weeks later, on my birthday, I woke up to find Mom had forgotten to buy a cake. Dad was at the office. David gave me a card he'd clearly made that morning with "Happy Birthday, Joe" scrawled in pencil. Madison didn't even acknowledge it. When I came downstairs that evening, hoping maybe they'd planned a surprise, Mom looked stricken and said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. This week just got away from me. How about we do something special next weekend?" We never did. When I asked Mom about it years later, in one of those rare moments of honesty we shared after I'd moved away for college, she'd sighed and said, "Your father always connected more with Madison. She was easier, I think, more affectionate. You were always so serious, so self-contained. He didn't know what to do with you." As if a child's personality was justification for parental neglect. As if being serious meant I didn't need love or attention or celebration. As if it was my fault for not being whatever they wanted me to be. But I learned. God, did I learn. I threw myself into being perfect. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect achievements. I thought if I could just be good enough, accomplished enough, successful enough, they'd finally see me, really see me. I graduated valedictorian. Dad came to the ceremony but left immediately after to make a business call. Madison complained the whole time that it was boring. I got a full scholarship to Cornell. Mom said, "Well, that's a relief. We couldn't have afforded it anyway, not with Madison starting at that private art school." The implication being that if I hadn't gotten the scholarship, I would have been expected to figure it out myself, while Madison's mediocre grades and creative spirit merited $40,000 a year in tuition. I landed my first job at a prestigious firm in Manhattan. Dad's only comment was, "About time you started earning your own way. Try not to forget where you came from." As if I could possibly forget a childhood spent being reminded that everything food, shelter, clothing was a gift I should be grateful for, not a right I deserved. Meanwhile, Madison floated through life on charm and entitlement. She dropped out of art school after 2 years when she decided it was stifling her creativity. No one demanded she pay back the $80,000. She moved back home at 25 rent-free while I was scraping together money for a security deposit on a studio apartment in Queens. When she finally moved out at 28, it was into an apartment whose deposit and first 3 months' rent were paid by Dad because she's getting on her feet. I was never given the option of getting on my feet. I was expected to hit the ground running and never stumble. The pattern crystallized during Mom's illness. I took unpaid leave to help with her care, depleting my savings to cover medical expenses insurance wouldn't touch. Madison visited twice in 6 months, both times bringing expensive flowers and posting Instagram photos with captions about being there for family. David came weekly, but never stayed long, always citing work obligations. Dad was there physically but emotionally absent, treating Mom's cancer like a business problem he couldn't quite solve. When the bills came, I paid them. Chemotherapy treatments, home care nurses, experimental medications insurance denied. I drained my retirement account, My emergency fund, everything I'd built. No one asked me to do it. But no one stopped me either. And certainly no one offered to help. After Mom died, I discovered Madison had forged her signature on several documents during those final months. Nothing legally actionable, just small things that made her life easier. Access to Mom's Costco membership. Authorization to use the family Netflix account Madison had been locked out of for non-payment. When I confronted her, she'd shrugged and said, "Mom wouldn't have minded. You're just being uptight about it like always." That was 2 years ago. 2 years of silence that I'd welcomed honestly. 2 years of building my savings back up, of going to therapy, of learning that family obligation wasn't actually obligation at all if the family in question had never treated you like you belonged. And now this email. This $15 $400 charge I never authorized, never agreed to for a trip I'd been told would cost $1,500. I opened my credit card account with shaking hands. There it was, posted this morning, already processed, not pending. Already charged, as if I'd made the purchase myself. But I hadn't. I'd never given anyone permission to use this card. Except, the memory hit me like cold water. 3 years ago, during Mom's illness, I'd added family members to my Apple Pay for emergency medical expenses. We'd needed to coordinate payment for a home health aide, and it was easier than constantly transferring money. I'd meant to remove them after Mom died. I never had. They'd had access to my financial accounts for 2 years, and I'd completely forgotten. And they'd known. Of course they'd known. Madison wasn't stupid, manipulative, entitled, and self-absorbed, yes, but not stupid. She'd probably been waiting for the perfect opportunity. I looked at the flight details again. First-class tickets were $4,800 each. Business class was $3,200. Economy was $1,200. The math was quick and brutal. Dad and Madison in luxury, while I, the one actually paying, was crammed in the back. It was almost poetic in its cruelty, a perfect metaphor for my entire life in this family. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison, complete with airplane and palm tree emojis. "OMG, so excited for this trip. Thanks for booking everything. You're the best, big sis. Can't wait to make memories together." I stared at the message for a long moment. The casual assumption that I'd done this willingly. The complete lack of acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, spending over 10 times what I'd been told might be worth discussing. The performative gratitude that was really just manipulation disguised as appreciation. A second text appeared. "Dad said to tell you he upgraded us because the girls deserve to travel in style." So sweet of him. And you know, business class would have been wasted on you anyway. You always just work on flights. There it was. The casual cruelty wrapped in cheerfulness. The dismissal of my comfort, my preferences, my right to choose how I spent my own money. All packaged as if it were a favor, as if they were doing me a kindness by deciding I didn't deserve the same treatment they gave themselves with my funds. I should have called immediately. Should have disputed the charge, confronted them, set boundaries that should have existed decades ago. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the exhaustion of always being the bad guy when I stood up for myself. Maybe it was the grim curiosity to see just how far they'd go. Or maybe somewhere deep down I wanted to gather every piece of evidence of their contempt before I finally definitively cut them out of my life. I took a screenshot of the email, the charge, Madison's texts. Saved them all to a folder I titled simply Evidence. Then I typed a response to Madison, looking forward to it. I smiled at my screen, but there was nothing warm in it. Nothing familial. Just cold, clear calculation. "Still their favorite child," I murmured to my empty office. "As long as she can pay for it." Something nagged at me after I sent that reply to Madison. If they'd charged the flights without asking what else had they done, I pulled up my credit card account again, this time scrolling past the airline charge to see what else had posted in the last 48 hours. My breath caught. Paradise Cove Resort and Spa, $8,200, posted yesterday. Luxury car rentals, St. Lucia, $2,400. Posted this morning. Island gourmet dining package. 3 $600. Posted this morning. Serenity Spa Retreat. 4 premium packages. $1,800. Posted an hour ago. I kept scrolling, my hands starting to shake. Private chef service. Snorkeling excursion. Sunset cruise. Wine tasting tour. Every single charge on my card. Every single one unauthorized. The total climbed past $28,000, and they were still booking things. Still spending my money like it was an unlimited resource they had every right to access. I felt physically sick. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time overstep. This was systematic, deliberate theft dressed up as family coordination. And the Apple Family account that made it possible sat there in my phone's settings, active and connected exactly as I'd left it 3 years ago, when Mom needed round-the-clock care and we all needed quick access to pay medical bills. I'd forgotten about it entirely. They clearly hadn't. My fingers moved automatically, opening my text thread with Madison. I typed quickly, anger making my words sharp. Did you seriously charge $28,000 to my card without asking? The flights, the resort, the car, all of it. The response came within seconds, casual and unconcerned. You gave permission when Mom was sick. Remember? The family account thing. Besides, you make more money than all of us combined. What's the big deal? It's just a vacation, family time. I thought you'd be happy to treat us. I read it 3 times, each time feeling a fresh wave of disbelief. The entitlement was breathtaking. Not even an acknowledgement that maybe charging someone's card without explicit current permission might be wrong. Just the breezy assumption that my money was communal property, available for her comfort whenever she decided she wanted it. I called my father. He answered on the first ring, his tone already defensive, as if he'd been expecting this. Before you start, Joanna, let me explain. You charged $28,000 to my credit card without asking me. I didn't charge anything. The travel agent handled the bookings and your card was on file in the family account. This is a family trip. Family shares resources. Your mother understood that. She would have wanted us to be together, not fighting over money like it's more important than relationships. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced. Invoke Mom. Make it about values rather than actions. Reframe my legitimate anger as me being the problem. Dad, you told me this trip would cost $1,500. You lied. His voice shifted, hardening into that tone I knew from childhood, the one that preceded lectures about gratitude and responsibility and knowing my place. I didn't lie. I told you your share would be around that amount. The rest is my gift to the family. I'm funding this trip to bring us together, and you should be grateful I'm including you at all after the way you've isolated yourself these past 2 years. You're funding it with my money. Money you have plenty of. Money you've hoarded while your sister struggles to make rent, while your brother tries to support his family on a modest salary, while I'm approaching retirement with medical bills piling up. You've always been selfish, Joanna, but I didn't think you'd be this petty, this small. Your mother would be ashamed. There it was, the nuclear option. The guilt bomb designed to make me back down, apologize, accept whatever they demanded. It had worked my entire life. Every time I tried to set a boundary, every time I questioned their treatment of me, someone invoked Mom's disappointment, or Dad's sacrifice, or family loyalty, and I'd cave. Not this time. Then Mom would be wrong, I said quietly, and hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From something else, something that felt almost like liberation. I opened my banking app and navigated to the fraud dispute section. Each transaction appeared in a neat list with a checkbox beside it. Flights, resort, car rental, meal packages, spa services, tours. All of it neatly documented, ready to be challenged. The screen prompted, "Are you sure you want to dispute these transactions? This will freeze the associated accounts and trigger a formal investigation." My finger hovered over the Confirm Dispute button. This would detonate everything. They'd be furious. There would be consequences. Family gatherings I'd never be invited to. Holidays spent alone. The final, irrevocable severing of relationships that had always been tenuous at best. But they'd already made their choice, hadn't they? They'd chosen my money over my dignity, my utility over my humanity. They'd looked at our family account access and seen not a tool for Mom's emergency care, but a permanent license to steal. I pressed the button. A confirmation message appeared. Dispute submitted. All related charges have been frozen pending investigation. The cardholder and all associated account users will be notified. I set my phone down and waited. It didn't take long. My phone lit up with a text from David, my brother, the perpetual peacekeeper. You shouldn't have done that. I picked up the phone feeling calmer than I had in years. My reply was simple, each word deliberate. Oh, but I've just started. I meant it. Every word. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about 37 years of being treated as less than of having my feelings dismissed and my boundaries violated, of being told that my worth lay only in what I could provide. They'd pushed too far, assumed too much, and underestimated who I'd become in those 2 years of silence. They were about to learn exactly how much that was a mistake. The phone calls started within an hour. First David, then Madison, then Dad again. I let them all go to voicemail. While my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages, I sat at my desk and did something I should have done years ago. I analyzed my family with the same clinical detachment I'd use for a financial portfolio. My father, Henry Hunter, was 68 years old and had spent his entire adult life building a moderately successful real estate business in Westchester. Not wealthy enough to be truly powerful, but comfortable enough to cultivate an image of success. Image was everything to him. Always had been. His children weren't people with individual needs and dreams. We were assets to be managed investments that should yield returns. David was supposed to take over the business and carry on the Hunter name. Madison was supposed to marry well and produce photogenic grandchildren. And me, I was supposed to be grateful, obedient, and useful. The problem was that I'd become too useful and in doing so, too independent. I'd out-earned him by my early 30s. My financial expertise exceeded his. I didn't need his approval or his money, which meant I was the only one of his children he couldn't control through economic leverage. It enraged him, I realized now. Every time I succeeded, it was a challenge to his authority. Every boundary I set was insubordination. My very existence as an independent, successful woman undermined the patriarchal structure he'd built his identity around. He'd loved Mom in his way, but even that love was possessive and conditional. She was his wife, which meant her primary purpose was to support his ambitions and manage his household. When she got sick, he treated her cancer like a business problem, consulting doctors, as if they were contractors making decisions without her input, becoming frustrated when her body didn't respond to treatment on his timeline. He never once asked what she wanted or how she felt. He told her what would happen and expected her compliance. After she died, he'd lost his buffer. Mom had been the one who smoothed over his harshness, who made excuses for his coldness, who convinced us that his inability to show affection was just his way, and we needed to understand him better. Without her translation services, we were left with the raw truth he didn't actually like us very much. We were disappointing investments that hadn't paid the dividends he'd expected. David, my older brother at 40, had capitulated entirely. He worked for Dad's company, lived in a house Dad helped him buy, drove a car from the company fleet. His wife Jennifer was nice enough, but completely cowed by the Hunter family dynamics. They had 2 kids I barely knew because family gatherings always felt more like hostile board meetings than celebrations. David had chosen security over integrity, and it showed in every interaction. He'd text me privately, "You know how Dad is, just apologize so we can move on." Or, "Can't you just let this go? You're the only one who has the resources to absorb this." He never acknowledged that letting it go meant accepting abuse. He never considered that perhaps Dad should be the one apologizing. David wasn't cruel, just weak. He'd been raised to believe that Dad's authority was absolute, that questioning it meant family destruction, that maintaining peace was more important than standing up for what's right. He'd seen me challenge Dad throughout our childhood and witnessed the consequences, the cold silences, the withdrawn affection, the subtle punishments. He'd learned the lesson I refuse to compliance equals survival. His text tonight had been typical. You shouldn't have done that. Not, what they did was wrong. Not, I understand why you're upset. Just a reflexive defense of the status quo, because the status quo kept him comfortable. Then there was Madison. At 33, she'd mastered the art of weaponized helplessness. Beautiful in that effortless way some women are, with Dad's strong features softened into femininity, and Mom's warm coloring she'd learned early that charm could substitute for effort. She'd dropped out of college, drifted through various creative pursuits, and never held a job for more than 6 months. But her Instagram showed a completely different story. 47,000 followers watching her curated life of brunch dates, boutique shopping, beach vacations, and motivational quotes about living authentically. Every bit of it was funded by Dad's credit cards and apparently mine. The beach house weekend Dad paid, the designer handbags Dad paid, the girls' trip to Napa she'd posted about last month. Probably also Dad, or possibly she'd started helping herself to my accounts even before this vacation. I made a mental note to check for smaller, earlier charges I might have missed. Madison genuinely believed she deserved this lifestyle. In her worldview, family meant unlimited access to each other's resources, but only in one direction. She could use my money, but I'd never dream of asking her for anything because she had nothing to give. She'd never once offered to help with Mom's medical bills, never contributed to family gifts or events, never paid her own way to anything. And yet she posted constantly about family values and the importance of supporting each other. The cognitive dissonance would be fascinating if it weren't so infuriating. She'd literally just stolen from me and then thanked me for my generosity in the same breath. The entitlement was so complete, so absolute that she couldn't even perceive the theft as theft. In her mind, my money was family money, and family money was hers to use as she pleased. What made Madison truly dangerous, though, was her understanding of social media as a weapon. She knew how to craft a narrative, how to position herself as victim or hero depending on what the situation required. She had thousands of strangers who believed her carefully constructed image and would rush to her defense if she painted herself as wronged. She'd already started, I noticed, with a new post, a throwback photo of us as children captioned, "Family isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Missing the days when love was simple." The comments were predictably supportive. "You're so strong. Family first, always. They'll come around, stay positive." She was already controlling the narrative, preparing her audience for the story she'd tell when our conflict became public. Poor Madison, generous and loving, betrayed by her cold, ungrateful sister. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Madison, this one with a different tone. "You'll regret making Dad angry. He won't forget this." Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. A threat. I screenshotted the message and saved it to the folder I'd created earlier, the folder I'd simply labeled Evidence. Because that's what all of this was becoming. Not a family conflict, but a documented case of financial abuse. And I was done being their victim. I was ready to be something else entirely. I spent the next week preparing, but not in the way they expected. I didn't cancel the trip. That would have been the obvious move, the self-protective choice. But I'd learned something important in those hours after filing the dispute. I needed evidence. Lots of it. Documented, time-stamped, irrefutable evidence of exactly who these people were and what they'd been doing to me for years. The bank's fraud investigation would handle the financial side, but I wanted more. I wanted a complete record of their behavior, their words, their casual cruelty. And the only way to get that was to go on this trip and let them show me exactly how far they were willing to go. So I packed my bags, arranged my out-of-office messages, and headed to JFK on the designated morning. I arrived exactly on time according to the original itinerary Dad had sent me. The flight was at 2 p.m. boarding at 1:30. I walked into the terminal at 12:45, giving myself the standard 45 minutes for security and finding the gate. Dad was already there, pacing near the check-in counter, his face red with irritation. Madison lounged on a nearby bench, scrolling through her phone. David stood awkwardly between them, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. "You're late," Dad barked the moment he saw me. I checked my phone deliberately. "The flight board's at 1:30. It's 12:47. The flight time was changed to 1 p.m. Boarding started 10 minutes ago. I sent an email." "I never received an email about a time change." "Well, that's not my problem. You should check your messages more carefully. Now we're all waiting because you can't be bothered to stay informed about family plans." His voice carried across the terminal. Other travelers glanced over, and I could see the judgment forming. Inconsiderate daughter holding up her family. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, searching for anything from him about a time change. Nothing. But I didn't argue. I simply took a screenshot of my empty search results, noted the time, and his accusation in my phone's notes app, and said, "I apologize for the confusion. Shall we board?" His eyes narrowed slightly, as if he'd expected more fight, more defense. My calm seemed to unsettle him. Madison bounced over her first-class boarding pass, already in hand like a trophy. She was wearing expensive athleisure, the kind that costs more than most people's monthly grocery budget, and her carry-on was a designer bag I recognized from her Instagram. "Finally, I've been dying to get on the plane. I need to take some photos before takeoff. The lighting is perfect right now." She held up her phone, angling for a selfie with the gate signage in the background. "Come on, Joe, get in the picture. Family vacation vibes." I stepped aside. "You go ahead. I need to check in." She pouted, but didn't push it immediately, pivoting to take solo shots instead. I watched her pose, tilt her head, pout her lips, checking each photo critically before moving to the next angle. She was creating content, I realized. This entire trip was content for her. We were all just props in her carefully curated narrative. At the desk, I presented my boarding pass. The agent looked at it, then at me with subtle surprise. "You're in 32F, Ms. Hunter, middle seat. Your family is in first and business class." "Yes, I see that." "Would you like to upgrade? We have availability in Comfort Plus." I considered it for a moment. I could easily afford it, but something made me decline. "No, thank you. This is fine." Dad was already through the priority boarding lane, Madison right behind him, both of them walking toward the plane without looking back. David hesitated near the regular boarding line, clearly conflicted. He caught my eye and offered an apologetic shrug. "You could have upgraded," he said quietly as I joined him. "You don't have to sit in the back." "Neither do you," I replied, "but here we are both in our assigned places." He flinched at that, understanding the implication, but said nothing more. As we walked down the jetway, I activated my phone's voice recording feature and slipped it into my jacket pocket, microphone exposed. The app I'd downloaded earlier this week would save everything to the cloud, automatically time-stamped and backed up. If they said anything incriminating, I'd have it documented. We reached the aircraft door. A flight attendant welcomed the first-class passengers warmly. I could see Dad settling into 1A, already demanding a scotch before we'd even pushed back from the gate. Madison was in 1B, phone out, recording a video. "First class to paradise with my amazing family, so blessed." I continued down the aisle toward economy, passing through business class where David was already seated with his laptop open, probably checking work emails to avoid thinking about the dysfunction he was enabling. Row 32 was exactly where I expected it, back of the plane next to the galley across from the lavatories. The middle seat between a businessman who'd already claimed the aisle and a college student sprawled across the window seat. I squeezed in, stowed my bag, and buckled my seatbelt. From this vantage point, I couldn't see my family, but I could hear Dad's voice carrying from first class, loud and imperious, as he spoke to the flight attendant. "Excuse me, miss. All in-flight purchases for this family should be charged to account holder Joanna Hunter. She's handling everything for this trip. Make sure that's noted in your system." I heard the flight attendant's professional response. "Of course, sir. I'll make a note. May I have the seat number?" 32F, in the back." "Very good, sir." There was a pause, then the flight attendant appeared in the galley behind me. She glanced at my seat, then back toward first class, and I caught something in her expression. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition. She'd served enough flights to understand family dynamics to see when someone was being used. Our eyes met briefly. She didn't say anything, but her slight nod told me she understood. I wondered how many women like me she'd seen quietly funding their family's luxury while sitting in the cheap seats. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath as the plane began to taxi. The recording app was running. My evidence folder was ready. The fraud dispute was processing. And I had 2 weeks to watch them reveal exactly who they were when they thought I was still the compliant, silent Joanna they'd always known. The engines roared to life. We lifted off, leaving New York behind, heading toward what they thought would be a family vacation paid for by their personal bank account. They thought I was still quiet Joanna, the one who accepted whatever they decided, who swallowed her anger and needs to keep the peace. They were wrong. So completely, devastatingly wrong. And by the time we landed back in New York 2 weeks from now, they would understand exactly how wrong they'd been. The flight was 6 hours of simmering tension masked by careful politeness. I spent it reading a novel I couldn't focus on, hyper-aware of every announcement, every interaction my family had with the flight crew, every drink they ordered and charged to my account. By the time we landed in St. Lucia, I had a comprehensive record of their casual theft. 3 premium meals, 5 rounds of drinks, 2 bottles of wine to take with them, and a set of airline amenity kits Madison decided she absolutely needed. The total came to $487. Small compared to the flights themselves, but revealing in its thoughtlessness. They didn't even pretend to ask. We collected our luggage and found the resort's private shuttle, a gleaming white Mercedes van with Paradise Cove Resort and Spa emblazoned on the side in gold lettering. The driver welcomed us warmly, and Dad immediately took charge, directing where bags should go and who should sit where. I ended up in the back row between a window and a stack of luggage, while Madison claimed the captain's chair behind the driver, already filming the scenic coastal drive for her Instagram stories. The resort was stunning, I had to admit. Set on a private peninsula, it featured white sand beaches, infinity pools that seemed to merge with the ocean, and architecture that balanced Caribbean charm with modern luxury. Palm trees swayed in the warm breeze. The scent of tropical flowers mixed with salt air. Under different circumstances, this would have been paradise. Instead, it felt like a carefully decorated trap. At the front desk, a polished woman in her 40s greeted us with professional warmth. "Welcome to Paradise Cove. You must be the Hunter family. We've been expecting you." Her eyes scanned her computer screen. "I see we have some wonderful accommodations arranged. Mr. Hunter and Ms. Madison Hunter in our oceanfront villa suite, Mr. David Hunter in a premium ocean view room, and Ms. Joanna Hunter in our garden view room." Dad leaned on the desk, his posture radiating entitlement. "Yes, and I believe there was an upgrade processed for the villa." "Oh, yes, sir," the manager beamed. "We've upgraded the villa to include a private infinity pool, outdoor shower, and personal concierge service. It's absolutely our finest accommodation. And may I say, Ms. Hunter?" She turned to me with genuine appreciation. "How generous of you to treat your family to such a special experience. The upgrade alone is $6,000. Your family is very lucky to have you." The words hung in the air. $6,000. On top of everything else. And she was thanking me publicly in front of my family and the other guests checking in nearby for a generosity I'd never agreed to. Madison lit up. "See, Joe. They know quality when they see it. Thank you so much, sis." She came around the desk and hugged me, positioning us both so her phone propped on the counter in video mode captured the moment. "You're literally the best sister anyone could ask for." I stood there accepting the hug with wooden arms and caught the desk manager's expression. She thought this was heartwarming. A successful older sister treating her family, receiving gratitude and love in return. She had no idea she was witnessing a performance, a carefully staged moment of false affection designed for social media consumption. "It's our pleasure to host such a close family," the manager continued, handing out key cards. Ms. Joanna, your room is in Building C garden level. Mr. Hunter and Ms. Madison, your villa is our signature property right on the point with sunset views. Mr. David, you're in Building a third floor. All of your charges have been consolidated to Ms. Joanna's master account as requested. Is there anything else we can help you with? That's perfect, Dad said, already pocketing his keycard. Come on, Madison, let's go see this villa. They left without looking back. David collected his key, gave me another one of his apologetic looks, and murmured, "I'll catch up with you later," before following our father. I stood alone at the desk, the manager still smiling at me with misplaced admiration. "The bellhop will help with your luggage, Ms. Hunter, and please, if you need anything at all during your stay, don't hesitate to ask. We want to make sure your family has the most memorable vacation possible." "Thank you." I managed my voice even. "I'm sure it will be memorable." I found Building C easily enough. Garden level was a polite term for ground floor partially obscured by lush vegetation. My room was nice enough, clean, comfortable, with a small patio that looked out onto a manicured garden, but it was clearly the budget option compared to the villa my father and sister now occupied, or even David's ocean view room. I set my suitcase down and noticed the envelope on the bedside table. My name was written on it in elegant script. Inside was a detailed invoice from the resort itemizing every charge associated with our stay. The villa upgrade $6,000. Premium room service package $1,200. Spa credits $800. Resort credit for excursions $2,500. And at the bottom in bold print, paid in full by Ms. Joanna Hunter. Thank you for choosing Paradise Cove Resort and Spa. I sat on the edge of the bed holding the invoice and felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Not anymore. Something colder and clearer. This wasn't just family dysfunction. This was systematic financial exploitation executed with such casual confidence that they didn't even try to hide it. They'd literally put everything in my name, told the resort staff to thank me for my generosity, and walked away assuming I'd just accept it. The old Joanna would have. She would have swallowed the humiliation, paid the bills, and told herself it was easier than fighting, that keeping the peace was worth the price. But I wasn't that person anymore. Maybe I'd never been really. Maybe I'd just been waiting for the moment when the cost of silence exceeded the cost of speaking up. I pulled out my phone and photographed the invoice from multiple angles, making sure every line item, every charge, every signature was crystal clear. Then I uploaded the photos to the secure cloud storage I'd set up specifically for this trip. The folder was labeled simply Resort Evidence, and it joined flight evidence and family messages in a growing digital archive of their contempt. My phone buzzed. Madison's latest Instagram post, a photo of the villa's infinity pool overlooking the ocean, with her in a designer bikini champagne glass raised. The caption read, "When your amazing sister upgrades you to paradise, so grateful for family who knows how to live. Thanks, Joe." The post already had hundreds of likes. Comments poured in goals. "Your sister is amazing. Family love is everything. You're so blessed." I screenshot the post and added it to my evidence folder. Then I opened a new document on my phone and titled it simply, Receipt Number 1. Below it, I began typing a detailed log. Date, time, location, amount, and a brief description of how each charge had been authorized without my consent. The invoice from the bedside table. The upgrade Madison and Dad were currently enjoying. The champagne she was drinking and broadcasting to thousands of strangers. All of it documented. All of it saved. All of it building toward something they couldn't yet imagine. I looked around my modest room at the garden view partially blocked by palm fronds and smiled. They thought I was still quiet, Joanna, accepting whatever they decided I deserved. They had no idea what I was building. No idea that every post, every charge, every moment of their casual cruelty was becoming evidence in a case they didn't know they were already losing. Let them enjoy their villa. Let Madison post her pictures. Let Dad feel powerful and in control. I had all the time in the world to show them exactly how wrong they were. I spent the afternoon in my room ostensibly resting from the travel, but actually organizing my evidence collection system. I'd downloaded several apps before leaving New York: a secure cloud backup service, a PDF scanner that could timestamp documents, and a voice recording app that automatically uploaded files and couldn't be deleted even if someone got hold of my phone. Everything was password protected and encrypted. I wasn't taking any chances. Around 4 p.m., Madison's posting frenzy began in earnest. She must have spent the afternoon setting up shots because they appeared in rapid succession, each one more elaborate than the last. The villa's infinity pool with her legs dangling in the water toes perfectly pedicured. A flat lay of luxury skincare products arranged on pristine white towels. A selfie in the outdoor shower with strategic placement of her arm and the water streams. A video pan of the ocean view from the private deck. But it was the captions that made them evidence. Living my best life thanks to my incredible sister who made this dream vacation possible. Some people just know how to show love, and Joe is definitely one of them. Grateful doesn't even begin to cover it. Another post an hour later. When your sister upgrades you to paradise because she knows you deserve it. This villa is literally everything. Thank you for always being so generous. Joe family goals right here. And another sunset champagne in our private villa. Special shout out to my big sis for treating us to this amazing experience. You're the real MVP. Each post garnered hundreds of likes within minutes. Her followers ate it up. The comments were a chorus of admiration. Your sister is incredible. What a blessing. This is what family is all about. You're so lucky to have her. Madison was creating a public narrative of my voluntary generosity time-stamped and witnessed by 47,000 people. She was literally building my case for me, one Instagram post at a time, and she had no idea. I opened each post, took careful screenshots that included the timestamp caption and top comments, and saved them to my cloud storage. Then I did something that felt almost theatrical in its calculation. I liked every single post. Not just liked, I left comments. Heart emojis, smiley faces. On one particularly egregious post showing her champagne toast, I even wrote, "Enjoy, sis." My phone rang almost immediately. Madison, her voice suspicious. "Why are you being so nice on my posts? Can't I be supportive? You're never on social media. You've liked like 3 of my posts in the last year. Now you're commenting on everything. Maybe I'm trying to be more present. Isn't that what Dad wanted, family connection?" There was a pause. I could practically hear her mind working, trying to figure out if I was being genuine or playing some angle she couldn't see. "Okay, well, thanks, I guess. We're having dinner at the resort's main restaurant at 7. Dad made a reservation. I'll be there. Wear something nice. It's fancy." She hung up without saying goodbye, and I smiled at my phone. The uncertainty in her voice was new. Madison was used to me being either overtly upset or resignedly compliant. This calm friendliness was confusing her, making her second-guess herself. Good. Uncertainty made people reveal more than confidence ever did. At 7, I arrived at the restaurant in a simple black dress I'd packed for exactly this kind of venue. The restaurant was open air, built on a deck that extended over the water with soft lighting and the sound of waves beneath us. Dad, Madison, and David were already seated at a table with a perfect sunset view. Of course they'd probably arrived early to claim it. I slid into the empty chair, and a waiter immediately appeared with menus and the wine list. "We've already ordered a bottle," Dad said, gesturing to the expensive Bordeaux breathing on the table. "Hope you don't mind paying for it." He laughed as if this were a joke rather than a statement of fact. I smiled and said nothing, but my hand moved to my purse where I'd already positioned my phone with the recording app active. The phone was angled so the microphone faced the table, nestled between a lipstick and my wallet, completely invisible. Madison was scrolling through her phone, occasionally showing David photos from her afternoon. "Look at this light. Isn't it perfect? I got like 200 likes in the first hour." "That's great, Mads," David said with the forced enthusiasm of someone who'd heard this exact statement dozens of times. The waiter returned to take our food orders. Dad ordered the lobster, the most expensive item on the menu. Madison got the filet mignon. David chose something mid-range, probably out of habit from years of being financially careful. I ordered a simple pasta dish. "Really, Joanna," Dad said after the waiter left. "We're at a 5-star resort and you're ordering pasta live a little. You can afford it." Another laugh, hollow and performative. "I'm happy with pasta." "You've always been so cautious, so controlled." He poured himself more wine, his third glass by my count. "Your mother used to worry about you, you know. Thought you'd never learn to just enjoy life." The mention of Mom was a gut punch, as it always was, but I kept my expression neutral. "At least you're finally useful for once," he continued, emboldened by the wine and the beautiful setting. "It's about time you gave back to this family after everything we've done for you. 20 years we fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. You don't just get that for free." David shifted uncomfortably. Madison didn't even look up from her phone. "I paid my own way through college," I said quietly. "Because you got scholarships. Who do you think drove you to all those academic competitions? Who supported you being such a nerdy little bookworm when we could have pushed you to be normal like your sister?" Supported is an interesting word choice. He waved his hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. The point is, family takes care of family. And now that you've got this fancy job and this income, it's your turn to contribute. That's how it works." "Is that how it works?" I took a sip of water, my voice still calm. "Because I don't remember you contributing much when Mom was sick." His face darkened. "How dare you? I was there every day." "You were physically present. There's a difference." "This is exactly what I'm talking about." He leaned forward, his voice getting louder. Other diners glanced over. "You've always been ungrateful, always finding fault. Your mother spoiled you, made you think you were special, and now you act like you're better than the rest of us." Madison finally looked up from her phone, sensing the tension. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," I said. "I just think adults should ask permission before spending other people's money." Other people's money. Your family. What's yours is ours. That's what family means. Interesting definition. You want to talk definitions. How about this: loyalty, respect, gratitude? Those used to mean something. Now everyone's so concerned with boundaries and independence and all this therapy nonsense. He was getting worked up now, wine loosening his tongue in exactly the way I'd hoped it would. "You've become cold, Joanna. Hard. Your mother would be disappointed in what you've turned into." There it was. The ultimate weapon, the one he'd been building toward. The accusation that my dead mother would be ashamed of me. It landed exactly as he intended. I felt the familiar squeeze of guilt and grief in my chest. But this time, I didn't let it control me. "Maybe," I said softly, "or maybe she'd understand exactly why I had to become this way." Madison was watching me now with narrowed eyes. She'd stopped scrolling her influencer instincts, sensing that something was off about my composure. "Why are you smiling?" she asked suddenly. I hadn't realized I was, but she was right. I could feel the slight upturn of my lips, the calm satisfaction of someone who'd just gotten exactly what they needed. I met her gaze directly. "Because you just posted your confession." Her face went blank with confusion. Dad looked between us, annoyed at losing the thread of his lecture. David's expression shifted to something like concern, finally starting to understand that perhaps I wasn't playing the role they'd assigned me. "What's that supposed to mean?" Madison demanded. I took another sip of water, letting the moment stretch. My phone continued recording in my purse, capturing the confusion, the tension, the dawning realization that maybe they'd miscalculated something fundamental about who I'd become. "Nothing," I said finally, my smile widening just a fraction. "Nothing at all. Let's enjoy our dinner. After all, I'm paying." The dinner ended in uncomfortable silence. Dad paid the check with a flourish, making sure the waiter understood that everything should be charged to my room account, and then excused himself with a comment about needing to call his business partner back home. Madison and David drifted away without much conversation, leaving me alone at the table watching the sun complete its descent into the ocean. I walked back to my room, slowly taking the long route through the resort gardens. The tropical night was alive with sounds: tree frogs, distant music from the beach bar, the ever-present rhythm of waves. My phone felt heavy in my purse, weighted with the recording of Dad's vitriol and casual cruelty. I had what I needed: multiple hours of audio, now supplemented by Madison's self-incriminating Instagram posts and meticulously documented financial records. But I felt hollowed out in a way I hadn't expected. Hearing Dad say out loud that Mom would be disappointed in me, even knowing it was manipulation, had opened an old wound I thought had scarred over. Back in my room, I changed into pajamas and sat on the bed with my laptop, transferring the day's recordings to my secure cloud storage. It was methodical work, organizing files, adding timestamps and descriptions, building the architecture of my case. The repetitive task was almost meditative. My email notification chimed. I almost ignored it, probably just work messages I'd deal with later. But something made me look. The sender name made my heart stop: Eleanor Hunter Estate Services. The subject line: "From your mother when you need this most." My hands started shaking before I even opened it. Mom had been dead for 2 years and 14 days. This couldn't be spam. The attorney's office was real, the address legitimate. But why would they be contacting me now? I clicked open the email. The message was brief. Dear Joanna, this email has been automatically generated per your mother's instructions to be sent exactly 2 years after her passing. Attached is a video message she recorded for you during her final weeks. She was very specific that you should receive this when you were ready to hear it. There are also documents requiring your signature. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. With sympathy and respect, Richard Morrison, Estate Attorney. Attached was a video file. My cursor hovered over it, and I realized I was terrified to click. What could Mom have possibly wanted to tell me that required a 2-year delay? What could be so important that she'd planned this message from beyond the grave? I clicked play. The video quality was poor, clearly filmed on someone's phone or tablet. Mom was in her bedroom, the one she'd spent her final months in, propped up on pillows, wearing the blue cardigan I'd given her that last Christmas. She looked so small, so diminished by the cancer that had consumed her. But her eyes were clear and focused directly at the camera. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice was weak but steady. If you're watching this, it means 2 years have passed since I died, and I'm so sorry I'm not there with you. But it also means something else. It means they've done exactly what I feared they would do. I pressed my hand to my mouth, tears already forming. I've watched your father control this family through money and guilt for 30 years, Mom continued. I've watched him favor Madison because she lets him feel powerful, and dismiss you because you challenge him simply by being competent and independent. I've watched David choose comfort over courage every single time. And I couldn't stop it, Joe. I couldn't protect you the way I should have. She paused, taking a labored breath, clearly in pain, but pushing through it. But I can protect you now. Before I got sick, my mother passed away, your grandmother. She left me a substantial inheritance, about $400,000. Your father never knew about it. I kept it secret in a separate account, waiting for the right moment to use it. I knew that after I was gone, they would turn on you. They would see your success and your money as theirs to use. So I put that inheritance in a trust fund with only your name on it. My breath caught. $400,000. Money I knew nothing about. Money Dad knew nothing about. Mr. Morrison has all the documents. The trust is entirely yours. Your father and siblings have no claim to it and no knowledge of its existence. I've also included power of attorney documents that establish your complete financial autonomy. If they try to control you through guilt or obligation, you have resources. You have options. You have power. Tears were streaming down my face now, but Mom wasn't finished. There's a folder with the trust documents. In it, I wrote down everything I observed about your father's control tactics, Madison's learned behavior, David's enabling. Not because I wanted to hurt them or speak ill of them, but because I wanted you to know that I saw it. I understood. It wasn't your imagination. It wasn't you being too sensitive or ungrateful or cold. It was real, and it was wrong, and you deserved better. She leaned forward slightly, and I could see how much effort this was costing her. Joe, listen to me carefully. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. You do not owe them your happiness, your money, or your peace of mind because they raised you. That was their job as parents, not a debt you can never repay. I love them, they're my family, but I love you more. And I need you to know that choosing yourself, protecting yourself, even walking away from them if necessary, is not betrayal. It's survival. My chest was heaving with sobs now. Mom understood. She'd always understood. I'm sorry I couldn't say this when I was alive. Your father would have made our lives hell, and I was too tired, too sick to fight anymore. But I can say it now. I am so proud of you. Not because of your career or your success, but because you're kind and honest and strong in ways none of them will ever understand. Whatever happens after you watch this video, whatever decisions you make about your relationship with them, know that I support you completely. She smiled that gentle smile I remembered from the photograph on my desk and reached toward the camera as if she could touch me across time and death. I love you, Joe. Always. You were the best thing I ever did in this life. Don't let them convince you otherwise. The video ended. The screen went black, and I sat in the darkness of my resort room clutching my laptop, sobbing in a way I hadn't allowed myself to since the funeral. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of recognition, of validation, of feeling truly seen and loved by the one person who mattered most. Mom knew. She'd always known. And she'd spent her final weeks ensuring I'd have the tools to protect myself from the family she was leaving me with. I replayed the video's final minute, hearing her say those words again. I love you, Joe. Always. You were the best thing I ever did in this life. Again, you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. And again, whatever decisions you make about your relationship with them, know that I support you completely. I wiped my face and looked at my mother's frozen image on the screen. Even diminished by illness, even knowing she was dying, she'd found the strength to protect me one last time. You never stopped protecting me, Mom, I whispered to the screen. I won't waste this gift. I promise. I opened the attached documents, trust fund paperwork, power of attorney forms, and a folder labeled For Joanna's Protection, filled with pages of Mom's handwriting, documenting years of financial control manipulation tactics and family dynamics she'd witnessed but been unable to change. Everything I needed. Not just money, but ammunition. Evidence. Validation from the one person whose opinion had ever really mattered to me. Tomorrow I'd call Mr. Morrison. Tonight I'd let myself feel what I hadn't allowed in 2 years. The certainty that I'd been loved, truly loved by someone who saw me exactly as I was and thought I was enough. More than enough. The best thing she'd ever done. I slept better that night than I had in 2 years. Mom's video played on repeat in my dreams, not the sad parts, but her voice saying, I support you completely. I woke up feeling lighter, clearer, like a weight I'd been carrying my entire life had finally been lifted. The trust fund wasn't just money, it was permission. Permission to stop sacrificing myself for people who'd never valued the sacrifice. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. My family assumed my silence meant compliance, and I let them believe it. Madison continued her Instagram documentation, tagging me in posts about family bonding and sister time that never actually happened. Dad held court at the resort's various bars, spinning stories about his business success to other vacationers. David existed in his usual state of uncomfortable observation, occasionally checking on me with guilty eyes, but never quite mustering the courage to actually ask if I was okay. I spent my time documenting everything, building my case, and waiting for the perfect moment to act. It came on the fourth night when Dad announced at breakfast that he'd arranged a special family dinner at the resort's signature restaurant, Celestial. "I've invited the Hendersons and the Park family," he said, referencing two wealthy couples they'd befriended over cocktails. "Time to show off our beautiful family. Joanna wears something elegant. First impressions matter in business, and David Henderson owns a chain of hotels. Could be a good connection for you. Always transactional, always thinking about what people could provide." "What time?" I asked, my voice neutral. 8 o'clock, reservations under my name, and Joe. He leaned forward, his tone shifting to something almost paternal. "Try to be pleasant. No more of this attitude you've been carrying around. These are important people." I nodded agreeably and excused myself from the table. Back in my room, I pulled out the one truly expensive thing. I'd packed: a midnight blue cocktail dress I'd bought for a work gala and never worn. If this was going to be a performance, I might as well look the part. At 8, I arrived at Celestial to find our party already gathered. The restaurant lived up to its name, open-air dining under a canopy of string lights that mimicked stars with the real stars visible beyond. Our table was the largest on the deck, positioned for maximum visibility. Dad had clearly requested it specifically. The Hendersons were an older couple, probably in their 70s, polished and moneyed in that effortless way of people born wealthy. The Parks were younger, maybe mid-40s tech money from California based on their conversation. Both couples greeted me warmly, having clearly been told I was the generous daughter funding this family vacation. "Your father speaks so highly of you," Mrs. Henderson said as I sat down. "It's wonderful to see a family so close." I smiled and said nothing, placing my phone deliberately on the table beside my water glass screen-up. Wine was ordered, an absurdly expensive bottle that Dad selected with theatrical consultation of the sommelier. Appetizers appeared. The conversation flowed easily, lubricated by alcohol and the beautiful setting. Dad was in his element, telling stories that painted him as wise and successful Madison, as vivacious and creative David, as dutiful and hardworking. And me, I was the successful daughter who'd finally learned what family means. That phrase appeared several times in his narrative. As the main courses were cleared and dessert menus distributed, Dad stood, wine glass in hand. My stomach tightened. "Here it comes." "I'd like to make a toast," he announced, his voice carrying across our table and drawing attention from nearby diners. "To family, to the bonds that hold us together even when life tries to pull us apart. And especially to my eldest daughter, Joanna." All eyes turned to me. I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded in my lap. Joanna has been through a difficult time since we lost her mother, my beloved wife, 2 years ago. She withdrew from us, focused on her career, built walls between herself and the people who love her most. But this trip has shown me that the daughter I raised is still in there, the generous, family-oriented woman her mother and I hoped she'd become. He raised his glass higher. "Joe, you've made this wonderful vacation possible for all of us. You've reminded us what it means to be a family. Thank you for finally coming home." The table applauded. Madison beamed at me across the centerpiece. The Hendersons and Parks nodded approvingly. David looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't raise my glass. Into the expectant silence, I spoke clearly. "Excuse me." I gestured to our waiter, who approached promptly. "Could you please confirm whose name is on tonight's dinner bill?" The waiter blinked, confused by the question. "Ma'am?" "The bill for this table. Whose account is it charged to?" He glanced at Dad, then back to me, clearly uncomfortable. "Let me check, ma'am." He consulted his tablet, scrolling quickly. "The reservation is under Henry Hunter, but charges are directed to room 342, which is registered to Ms. Joanna Hunter." The atmosphere shifted subtly. The guests' expressions moved from warm approval to puzzlement. Why would I need to ask whose bill this was if I'd volunteered to pay for it? "I see," I said calmly. "And the total so far?" "With wine and the current courses, approximately $3,200, ma'am, plus gratuity." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly. Mr. Park exchanged a glance with his wife. "Thank you," I told the waiter, then looked directly at my father. "Did I authorize you to charge this dinner to my room?" His face flushed. "This is family dinner. We didn't discuss anything. You announced it this morning and told me what time to arrive." I picked up my phone, opened my banking app with deliberate slowness, and navigated to the fraud dispute section. My voice remained perfectly level, but loud enough for the entire table to hear clearly. "I'm confirming a dispute on all unauthorized charges. Transaction submitted." I turned the phone so everyone could see the screen. The notification banner was clear. "Fraud dispute confirmed. All related charges frozen pending investigation." Nobody spoke. The silence stretched out, broken only by the distant sound of waves and the murmur of conversation from other tables who hadn't yet noticed our drama. Henry's face cycled through expressions like a slideshow: confusion first, then comprehension, then anger, then something close to panic. "Joanna, what are you doing?" "Protecting my finances from unauthorized use. You charged $28,000 to my credit card without permission. Did you think I wouldn't notice, or did you just not care?" Madison gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. David closed his eyes. "This is a private family matter," Dad hissed, acutely aware of our audience. "Then perhaps you shouldn't have made it public by charging it to my accounts and throwing dinner parties to celebrate your generosity with my money." Mrs. Henderson began gathering her purse. Mr. Park signaled for their waiter, clearly wanting to extract themselves from this situation. The younger Parks were frozen witnesses to something they desperately wished they weren't seeing. "You're embarrassing yourself," Dad said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Embarrassing this family. Your mother would be—" "My mother," I interrupted, standing and placing my napkin beside my untouched dessert menu, "left me a video message. She told me exactly what she thought of how you treat me. And you know what? She was on my side." I met his eyes directly, and for the first time in my entire life, I saw him flinch. "Enjoy your dinner," I said to the table. "I'm sure you'll figure out payment arrangements. After all, family takes care of family. Isn't that what you always say, Dad?" I picked up my phone and walked away, my heels clicking against the wooden deck with measured, deliberate steps. Behind me, I heard the scrape of chairs as the Hendersons and Parks made hasty excuses. I heard Madison's voice, high and panicked. "Joe, wait, please." I didn't wait. At the restaurant's exit, I paused just long enough to look back. Dad stood at the head of the table, his face purple with rage and humiliation, surrounded by the ruins of his carefully constructed evening. Madison was crying. David sat with his head in his hands. Their guests were in full retreat. I smiled, and I knew it was cold. "Let's see who pays now," I said, soft enough that only the hostess heard me, and walked out into the tropical night. I made it back to my room before my hands started shaking. Not from fear or regret, but from the sheer adrenaline of finally, after 37 years, standing up to him in a way he couldn't dismiss, or talk over, or manipulate away. I poured myself a glass of water from the minibar and stood on my small patio, letting the night air cool my flushed face. From my ground-level vantage point, I could see the main path that led from the restaurant to the resort lobby. I didn't have to wait long before I saw Dad storming down it, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesticulating wildly. Even from a distance, his body language radiated fury. He paced back and forth in the lobby's outdoor seating area, visible through the open-air architecture, and I could hear fragments of his raised voice carried on the breeze. I moved quietly along the garden path that ran parallel to the lobby, staying in the shadows of the palm trees, until I was close enough to hear clearly. His conversation was one-sided, but I could piece together enough. "It's theft. She's my daughter. We had a family arrangement. No, not written, but implied. How was I supposed to know she'd—" "Yes, I understand attorney-client privilege, but you need to tell me what to—" "She what?" A long pause. I watched his face go from red to white, his aggressive pacing stopping abruptly. "Criminal charges. For family expenses." "That's insane. Identity fraud. She gave us access years ago. I don't care what the technical definition is. This is family business. No, I will not apologize to her, because she's being vindictive and—" "Hello? Hello?" He pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at it with an expression I'd never seen on his face before: genuine fear. His attorney had clearly hung up on him, probably after recommending he settle immediately and stop incriminating himself over the phone. For the first time in my life, I was watching Henry Hunter realize that his authority meant nothing. The legal system didn't care about his explanations or his justifications or his belief that family trumped consent. The law was clear and he'd broken it. Brazenly, publicly, with thousands of dollars in documented evidence. I took my phone out and began recording video from the shadows, capturing his distress, his panic, his complete loss of the control he'd wielded like a weapon my entire life. Madison burst out of the restaurant entrance, practically running down the path. She spotted Dad immediately and rushed over, her face blotchy from crying, her careful makeup ruined. David followed more slowly, maintaining distance as if he could somehow not be associated with the scene unfolding. "What did your lawyer say?" Madison demanded, her voice shrill enough to carry clearly. "Can we fix this? Can we make her drop it?" "He said we have no legal standing," Dad said, and his voice was hollow in a way I'd never heard before. "He said she never authorized the charges, that using her old account access from your mother's illness constitutes identity fraud." "Identity fraud, Dad. That sounds serious. That sounds like jail serious." "Don't be dramatic. They don't put people in jail for family expenses." "She filed a fraud complaint with the bank. They're investigating. This isn't just family drama anymore." David arrived then, his hands in his pockets, his expression carefully neutral. "Maybe we should have asked her first." Madison whirled on him. "Oh, now you have an opinion. Where was this wisdom 3 days ago when Dad was booking everything?" "I told you she'd changed," David said quietly. "I told you she wasn't the same person she was when Mom was alive. But nobody listens to me. Because you never say anything useful. You just stand there being uncomfortable while the rest of us make decisions." "Maybe that's because your decisions keep making things worse," David shot back, and I was surprised by the sharpness in his tone. Apparently Madison was too, because she actually stepped back, shocked into momentary silence. "This is your sister's doing," Dad interjected, trying to regain control of the situation. "She's being vindictive, spiteful. She wants to hurt us because she's jealous of Madison, resentful of the attention she gets, angry that I've always seen through her cold, manipulative—" "Dad, stop," David interrupted. "Just stop. Joe isn't cold or manipulative. She paid for Mom's cancer treatment when you said we couldn't afford it. She sent money for every birthday, every holiday, every time any of us needed help. And this is how we repaid her, by stealing from her and then acting like she should be grateful for the privilege." The courtyard went silent. I stopped recording, my heart pounding. David had never in all our lives directly challenged our father's narrative about me. "You don't understand the full situation," Dad said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "I understand that I watched Madison add Joe's credit card to booking systems without asking. I understand that you told the resort to charge everything to her room. I understand that we spent almost $30,000 of her money and never once thought to confirm she agreed to it. What am I misunderstanding exactly?" Madison let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a shriek. "I told you we shouldn't have pushed her. I told you she's been different since Mom died. But no. You said she'd come around. You said family is family. You said—" She broke off, dissolving into tears again. "This is fixable," Dad insisted, but he was talking to himself now. "We'll go to her room. We'll explain. We'll make her understand that this is just a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. She's always been reasonable when we talk to her calmly." "She walked out of dinner after you toasted her generosity in front of strangers, Dad. I don't think calm conversation is going to work." Then what do you suggest? Dad's voice rose again, edged with desperation. We just let her destroy this family, let her ruin our reputations, our relationships, everything your mother and I built. Maybe, David said slowly. We deserve it. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Madison stopped crying long enough to stare at him. Dad looked like he'd been slapped. I backed away from my vantage point, returning to my room's patio, but I could still hear them arguing as other guests began giving them wide berth, the scene too uncomfortable to ignore. I sat on the small patio chair and watched from a distance as Dad continued pacing, as Madison's composure disintegrated further as David stood apart from both of them, no longer trying to bridge the gap. The family was fracturing in real time, and I was watching it happen with a strange sense of detachment. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated or satisfied or any of the things I'd imagined I might feel if I ever stood up to them. I felt calm, clear, like I'd been holding my breath for 37 years and finally exhaled. This wasn't revenge. Not really. This was simply refusing to participate in my own exploitation. This was establishing boundaries that should have existed from the beginning. This was saying clearly and unambiguously that my money was mine, my choices were mine, my life was mine. Without my compliance, without my silence, without my willingness to absorb their demands and manipulation and casual cruelty, they had nothing. They were just three people who'd built their comfort on someone else's sacrifice, and that someone had finally said no. I picked up my phone and added the video of their argument to my evidence folder. Then I opened my mother's video message and watched the final minute again, hearing her tell me I wasn't obligated to set myself on fire to keep them warm. You were right, Mom, I whispered to her image on the screen. About all of it. Through my patio screen, I could still hear Madison's voice, high and panicked, echoing across the courtyard. I could see Dad's silhouette still pacing, still trying to find an angle, still believing he could control a situation that had moved far beyond his authority. Let them burn, I murmured, closing my laptop and settling back in my chair. I'm done being the kindling. The night was warm and clear, stars visible above the palm trees. Somewhere in the distance, music played from the beach bar. The resort continued its rhythm, indifferent to the small family drama playing out in its courtyard, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt something close to peace. I woke early the next morning feeling remarkably refreshed. There's something liberating about burning bridges you should have destroyed years ago. I ordered room service, paying for it myself with a different card they had no access to, and ate breakfast on my patio while reviewing the evidence I'd collected so far. The folder was substantial now, recordings, screenshots, receipts, even video of their courtyard argument. Everything time-stamped, everything documented, everything uploaded to secure cloud storage they couldn't access or delete. Around 9, I decided to venture out to the resort's main pool. I'd avoided it so far knowing my family would be there, but I was done hiding. I packed a beach bag with sunscreen, a novel, and my phone, and headed out into the brilliant Caribbean morning. The pool area was already populated with resort guests lounging on cushioned chairs, some swimming, others reading under umbrellas. I found a spot away from the main clusters of people and settled in, deliberately visible but not inviting interaction. I'd been reading for perhaps 20 minutes when I heard raised voices from the direction of the breakfast pavilion. I looked up to see Dad at the hostess stand, his face already flushed with frustration. The scene was far enough away that I couldn't hear specific words, but the body language was clear. Something was wrong. A small crowd was beginning to notice. Other guests glanced over with that particular expression people get when they're trying to watch drama unfold without being obvious about it. I stood, slipping my phone into my beach dress pocket, and moved closer, staying behind a decorative pillar that offered both concealment and a clear view. Dad was attempting to pay for breakfast with his credit card. The server ran it through. The tablet frowned, tried again. Declined. Dad pulled out a second card, his business American Express that he'd always been so proud of. The server tried it. Also declined. A third card. Same result. This is ridiculous. Dad's voice carried now loud enough for nearby tables to hear clearly. There's nothing wrong with these cards. Try again. Sir, I've tried 3 times on each card. They're all being declined. Do you have another payment method? Madison appeared, then pulling out her wallet. Here, use mine. Her card was declined before the server even handed the tablet back. Madison's face went pale. That's impossible. I just used this yesterday. The restaurant manager approached professional sympathy on her face. I'm very sorry, but it appears all accounts associated with your party have been flagged by our payment system. Until the issue is resolved, we can only accept cash or an unaffiliated credit card. Flagged, Dad repeated. What does that mean, flagged? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, sir, but it's related to the fraud investigation notification we received from your bank last night. The words, fraud investigation, rippled through the nearby tables like a stone dropped in still water. Heads turned more openly now. Whispers started. Madison looked like she might faint. Dad, everyone can hear this. I don't care who hears it. This is a mistake. I want to speak to your supervisor. I am the supervisor, sir. The manager's voice remained calm but firm. I can only suggest you contact your banking institution to resolve the matter. Until then, breakfast will need to be paid in cash. The total is $247. I watched Dad's face cycle through fury, humiliation, and calculation. He didn't carry much cash. He'd told me once that cash was for people who couldn't manage credit properly. Madison was digging through her purse, coming up with maybe $60. David joined them, pulling out his wallet, producing another $40. They were $150 short, and everyone was watching. A resort security officer appeared, then walking with purpose toward their table. He was carrying a manila envelope. Mr. Henry Hunter. What now? Dad snapped. I need you to sign for this, sir. The officer handed him the envelope and a clipboard. Dad scrawled his signature and ripped open the envelope, pulling out an official-looking document. I was too far away to read it, but I watched his expression change as he scanned the page. Madison leaned over his shoulder, her hand flying to her mouth as she read. Even David, standing slightly apart as always, went rigid when he saw the header. The security officer waited a moment, then said clearly, You're required to cooperate with the investigation per resort policy and local banking regulations. Someone from the Financial Crimes Unit will contact you within 24 hours. Have a good day, sir. He walked away, leaving my family standing in the breakfast pavilion holding a document that essentially announced they were under criminal investigation, surrounded by witnesses, and unable to pay for the meal they'd just eaten. The manager said something I couldn't hear, probably offering to let them pay later or work something out. Dad crumpled the notice in his fist and stalked away without responding. Madison hurried after him, leaving David to deal with the payment situation and the stares of dozens of guests who now knew exactly what kind of family drama they were witnessing. I returned to my pool chair, picked up my book, and tried to focus on the words. I'd barely read a page when Madison appeared, walking toward me with the determined stride of someone who'd been sent on a mission she didn't want, but felt she had no choice but to complete. She stopped beside my chair, her designer sunglasses hiding eyes I knew were probably red from crying. Joe, please. This is getting out of hand. I turned a page, not looking up. Dad didn't mean to hurt you. You know how he is. He just doesn't think about these things the way normal people do. And I know I should have asked before using your card, but it was the family account and I just thought... Her voice cracked. Can't we work this out privately? Talk like adults. Think about the family reputation. People are staring at us. They're whispering. Someone probably posted about this already on social media. I finally looked up at her, lowering my sunglasses so she could see my eyes. I've thought about nothing but family for 37 years, Madison. About family reputation, family needs, family feelings. It's your turn now. That's not fair. You're right. It's not fair. Nothing about this has been fair. But that's ending. I returned my attention to my book with deliberate dismissal. She stood there for another moment, clearly trying to think of something else to say, some angle that might work. Finding nothing, she turned and walked away, her shoulders shaking in a way that suggested fresh tears. My phone rang. Dad's number. I let it ring twice, watching the screen flash with his name. On the third ring, I answered, my voice perfectly calm. "Hello, Dad. Ready to talk like adults now." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear Dad breathing, could practically feel him trying to regain the upper hand he'd lost so spectacularly in the last 18 hours. "Business center. 20 minutes. Come alone." He hung up before I could respond. I took my time getting there. Let him wait. Let him stew in the uncertainty of not knowing what I'd say or do. I stopped by my room to change into something professional, white linen pants and a crisp navy blouse, and to activate my recording app. Whatever was about to happen, I wanted every word documented. The business center was a small air-conditioned room off the main lobby with a conference table, printer, and computer stations for guests who needed to work during vacation. Dad was already there, sitting at the head of the table like he was chairing a board meeting. In front of him was a stack of printed documents neatly stapled. He'd found a printer and clearly spent the morning working. That took planning, which meant he'd been up since dawn preparing this ambush. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I remained standing. "What is this? A solution? A way to resolve this situation before it gets any worse?" He pushed the documents toward me. "I had my attorney draft this last night after our conversation. It's a financial authorization form. It retroactively approves all charges made to your accounts during this trip and requires you to withdraw the fraud complaint immediately." I picked up the papers, scanning the dense legal language. It was exactly what he'd described, a document that would essentially validate everything they'd done, make it legal after the fact, and force me to drop all investigations and disputes. "You want me to sign this?" "I'm telling you to sign this." His voice hardened into the tone I'd heard my entire childhood, the one that brooked no argument. "Sign it, Joanna, or you're no longer my daughter. I'll cut you out of everything, family events, holidays, inheritance, all of it. You'll be dead to this family." "Mom's already dead. You can't use her against me anymore." His jaw tightened. "Your mother would be ashamed of what you're doing, turning on your own family over money, destroying our reputation, humiliating us in public, treating us like criminals when all we did was try to include you in a family vacation. That I paid for without being asked. You have the money. What difference does it make who technically charges what, when it's all family money anyway?" "It's not family money, it's my money. That I earned. That you stole." "I didn't steal anything. I'm your father. I raised you, fed you, clothed you for 18 years, which was your legal obligation as a parent, not a debt I can never repay." I was surprised by how steady my voice remained. "And I've more than repaid whatever you think I owe. Mom's medical bills alone. Don't you dare bring your mother into this." "Why not?" "You do constantly. Every time you need to manipulate me, you invoke her memory. You did it on the phone when you invited me here. You did it at dinner last night. You're doing it right now." I set the papers back on the table. "I'm not signing this." The door opened. Madison entered, and I had to admire the timing. Clearly they'd coordinated this. Her eyes were red and swollen, her makeup deliberately minimal to emphasize her distress. She wore a simple white dress, her hair pulled back, looking young and vulnerable in a way I knew was completely calculated. "Joe, please," she said, her voice breaking on my name. "Please don't do this to Dad. He's old. The stress of this investigation is killing him. You're successful, independent. You don't need this money back. It's pocket change to you. But this is destroying him." I watched her performance with detached interest. She'd always been good at this, at weaponizing her emotions, at making her tears into tools. When we were children, she'd cry to get me in trouble. As adults, she cried to get what she wanted. The tears were real. Madison genuinely felt distressed, but the distress was about consequences, not remorse. "We're family," Madison continued, moving closer. "Family forgives. Family doesn't destroy each other over misunderstandings. Dad just wants to make things right. Sign the paper and we can move past this. Please, Joe. For me. For our family. I noticed her handbag on her shoulder. Gucci probably $1,500. Her manicure was fresh French tips that would have cost $100 at the resort spa. Her resort wear had designer labels I could see from where I stood. All of it funded by other people's money while she stood here pleading poverty and family loyalty. How much of your lifestyle have I funded over the years? I asked quietly. She blinked, thrown by the question. What? Rough estimate, how much of my money has gone to supporting your influencer persona? The clothes, the trips, the brunch photos, all of it? That's not... Joe, this isn't about 50,000, 100,000 more. Her face flushed. Family helps each other. One Direction isn't helping, it's using. Dad stood slamming his hand on the table. Enough of this. You have two choices, Joanna. Sign this document and remain part of this family, or refuse and be cut off permanently. Those are your options. Decide now. I looked at him. Really looked at him and saw a man who'd never once in my entire life asked me what I needed or wanted. Who'd never celebrated my achievements. Who'd never protected me from his own favoritism or Madison's entitlement. Who'd used Mom's death as a weapon to control me and now stood here demanding I validate his theft. Fine, I said. I'll sign. The change in his expression was instantaneous triumph satisfaction, the smug certainty that he'd won because he always won. Madison's tears stopped like someone had flipped a switch. Smart choice, Dad said, pushing the papers toward me with a pen. I sat down and made a show of reading every single page carefully. Dad's satisfaction turned to impatience, then irritation as I took my time. But he couldn't rush me without revealing that he didn't actually want me to read what I was signing. I pulled out my phone. I'm photographing each page for my records. That's not necessary. It's necessary to me. I photographed every page methodically front and back, making sure every word of legal language was clearly captured. Then I picked up the pen, and above the signature line, I wrote in clear handwriting, "Signed under duress and coercion for legal review only, J.H." I signed my name below it, dated it, and pushed the papers back across the table. Dad snatched them up immediately, barely glancing at my signature, too focused on his victory to notice the modification. He was already standing gathering his things, probably planning how he'd spin this to the resort, to the bank, to anyone who'd been watching our family drama. I'll get this to my attorney immediately. The investigation will be dropped by tomorrow. I'm sure it will be handled appropriately, I said, standing and folding my copy of the document, the one I'd made sure to get before he could stop me. Madison was already at the door, relief visible on her face, probably planning her redemptive Instagram post about family reconciliation and the power of forgiveness. I paused at the threshold, looking back at my father as he organized his papers with satisfied efficiency. Dad. He looked up, still smiling with his victory. I just signed your confession. You're welcome. His smile faltered. What? That document you'll be showing your attorney, the one that proves you demanded I retroactively authorize fraud, that you coerced me into withdrawing a legitimate criminal complaint, that you threatened to disown me unless I complied. I held up my phone showing the photos I'd taken. All documented, every page, along with audio of this entire conversation. The color drained from his face. Any competent attorney will tell you that a signature obtained under duress is not only invalid, it's evidence of additional crimes, coercion, intimidation, possibly extortion depending on how the prosecutor wants to charge it. I tucked my phone into my pocket. But I'm sure your lawyer will explain all that when you show him your victory. I walked out, leaving him frozen at the conference table, finally understanding that he hadn't won at all. He'd just handed me exactly what I needed to bury him. Back in my room, I immediately uploaded the photos of the signed coercion document to my secure cloud storage, then sent copies to the estate attorney Mom had connected me with, Mr. Morrison, along with a brief explanation of what had just transpired. His response was almost instant. Do not sign anything else. That document may actually help your case. Will advise after review. I felt energized in a way I hadn't in years, like every neuron in my brain was firing at full capacity. I opened my laptop and began organizing all my evidence into a coherent timeline. Dates, amounts, screenshots, recordings, everything arranged chronologically to show the pattern of exploitation. As I scrolled through my phone's various folders and apps, making sure I hadn't missed any relevant screenshots or photos, I noticed something odd in my voice memo app. There was a file I didn't remember recording dated 8 months ago. The duration showed 2 hours and 17 minutes. 8 months ago would have been right after Mom's funeral. I'd gone to the house to meet with Mr. Morrison about the estate to collect some of Mom's personal items I wanted to keep. I remembered setting up my phone to record our conversation about the will and some financial matters sitting in the living room while we talked. But 2 hours. Our conversation had been maybe 45 minutes. Curious, I plugged in my headphones and started playing the file. The first part was indeed my meeting with Mr. Morrison, his voice explaining various estate details, my questions about paperwork and timelines. Then his departure, me thanking him, the sound of the front door closing. I must have forgotten to stop the recording. What came next made my blood run cold. About 10 minutes of silence, just ambient house sounds. Then the front door opening again. Dad's voice irritated. "Finally! I thought that lawyer would never leave." Madison's voice closer to where my phone must have been. "Is she gone?" "Took her car 5 minutes ago. We have time." "Good. We need to talk about the Joe situation." My finger hovered over the pause button, but I didn't press it. The Joe situation. 8 months ago, barely weeks after we'd buried Mom, they were having a meeting about me. Dad's voice continued. "Eleanor's death actually helps us here if we're strategic about it. Joanna's drowning in guilt. I can see it every time she looks at photos of her mother. We can use that." "Use it how?" Madison sounded genuinely curious, not appalled. "Family trips, family emergencies, family needs. She won't say no, not when she's this raw. And she's got that finance job now, probably clearing 6 figures easy, maybe more. The girl owes us for raising her. Time to collect." I felt sick. This was 3 weeks after Mom's funeral. 3 weeks after I'd emptied my savings to pay for medical bills they'd never offered to help with. And they were strategizing how to extract more. Madison's voice thoughtful. "I've already added her card to my Apple Pay. She set up that family account thing when Mom was sick, remember? For medical emergencies, she never took me off it." "Smart girl." Dad actually sounded proud. "Start with small charges. Test the waters." "How small?" "Few hundred here and there. Restaurants, shopping. She won't even notice. She never checks her statements that carefully, too busy with work. And if she does notice, then we're family helping family. Shared resources. She'll feel guilty for even questioning it." Dad laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "Make them bigger over time. She'll pay. She always does. After all, we gave her a roof over her head for 18 years. Food, clothes, education. That's worth something." "Dad, that's literally just being a parent." "Doesn't matter. She doesn't see it that way. She's always felt like she had to earn her place in this family. We just help her continue feeling that way." The recording continued with more discussion, which of my accounts they thought had the most money, how to coordinate charges so they looked legitimate, even talking about a big trip they could plan where I'd naturally want to contribute. They were literally planning the vacation I was currently on 8 months before Dad even called to invite me. The recording ended when I must have returned to the house and picked up my phone, the rustling sound of movement, and then silence as the app finally stopped recording. I sat frozen headphones still and staring at the file information. 2 hours and 17 minutes of premeditated conspiracy. Not a family misunderstanding, not poor communication, not even opportunistic theft. Calculated, deliberate, long-term financial exploitation planned while Mom's grave was still fresh. I immediately forwarded the file to Mr. Morrison with a message. "This was recorded 8 months before the trip. The phone was left in the living room by accident after you and I met to discuss Mom's estate. They didn't know it was recording. They planned everything. Then I sent it to my bank's fraud investigation email with a similar explanation. Then I saved 3 backup copies to different cloud services. My phone rang. Mr. Morrison calling instead of texting, Ms. Hunter. I've listened to the first 30 minutes of that recording. Do not delete it. Do not mention it to your family. Do not let them know you have it. I won't. This changes the entire nature of your case. This isn't opportunistic fraud, this is conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. This is premeditated identity theft. This is elder abuse statutes if we can argue they exploited your grief state. This recording is potentially worth more than the money they stole. What do? Nothing. Continue documenting everything they do now, but don't confront them about this recording. Let them continue thinking their plan is working, or that at worst you're upset about the trip charges. They have no idea you have proof that they planned this months in advance, that they specifically discussed using your grief to manipulate you, that they acknowledged they were exploiting you. They said Mom's death helps them, I whispered. 3 weeks after her funeral. I know. I'm sorry you had to hear that. But Joanna, his voice softened slightly. This recording proves something important beyond the legal case. It proves you weren't imagining the dysfunction. You weren't being oversensitive or difficult or cold. They were actively, consciously exploiting you. You have proof. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The recording had shaken something loose in me. Not anger exactly, but clarity. This wasn't about family disagreement or different perspectives on money. This was criminal behavior planned and executed by people who saw me not as a daughter or sister, but as a resource to be managed and depleted. My phone buzzed. Another text from Mr. Morrison. Don't confront them yet. This recording is worth more than they know. I looked out my patio door at the beautiful Caribbean afternoon at the resort where my family was probably trying to figure out their next move at the paradise setting for what they'd thought would be their successful execution of an 8-month plan. They had no idea what I had. No idea that their private conversation had been captured. No idea that their strategy session was now evidence in what was becoming a criminal investigation. Let them think they still had control. Let them think the coercion document had worked, or that at worst they were dealing with a family dispute that could be smoothed over. I had time. I had evidence. And I had something they'd never expected me to develop, the absolute certainty that I owed them nothing. Nothing at all. The next 2 days passed in an eerie calm. My family seemed to believe that the signed document had resolved everything, that I'd capitulated, and we could all move forward pretending nothing had happened. Dad actually smiled at me during a chance encounter in the lobby. Madison posted a sunset photo with a caption about family healing. David sent me a tentative text, glad things worked out. I let them believe it. Mr. Morrison's advice echoed in my head, let them think they've won. The recording was my insurance policy, my nuclear option, and they had no idea it existed. On the 3rd evening, the resort announced a charity gala in the main ballroom, a fundraiser for local schools, with an auction, entertainment, and speeches from select guests. The invitation mentioned that several attendees had volunteered to share inspiring stories about family and community values. I had a sinking feeling I knew who one of those speakers would be. Sure enough, at breakfast the next morning, Dad was practically glowing. I've been asked to speak at the gala tonight. They want someone to talk about family values, maintaining connections across generations. Should be good for rebuilding our image after that unfortunate misunderstanding earlier this week. Misunderstanding. That's what he was calling it now. I'll be there, I said neutrally. Wear something appropriate. There will be influential people attending. And Joanna? He leaned closer. Try to look supportive. A united family front would be appreciated. I spent the afternoon preparing. I transferred the audio recording to my tablet, created a simple text transcription that would display on screen while it played and tested, connecting the tablet to various projection systems using adapters I'd purchased from the resort's business center. Everything worked perfectly. The gala began at 7. I arrived at 7:30 deliberately late, wearing the black cocktail dress I'd worn to that first dinner, the one that had ended with me walking out. The ballroom was beautiful, decorated with white flowers and soft lighting, round tables arranged around a small stage with a podium and projection screen. Dad was holding court near the bar, Madison beside him in a stunning emerald dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was filming intermittently on her phone, capturing content for her followers. David sat alone at our assigned table, looking uncomfortable in his suit. I took my seat next to David without greeting anyone, my tablet in a slim portfolio case beside me. "You okay?" David asked quietly. "Never better." The charity presentation began, resort management thanking everyone for attending, explaining the cause, introducing the evening schedule. Then the speeches. A local teacher talking about educational needs. A resort owner discussing community investment. And then, we're honored to have Henry Hunter, a successful businessman and devoted family man, share some thoughts on family values. Dad approached the podium to polite applause. Madison filmed him, her phone held high. I could see her Instagram live counter, 237 viewers watching in real time. "Thank you," Dad began, his voice warm and practiced. "Family is everything. It's the foundation of our society, the source of our strength, the legacy we leave behind. I'm blessed to have 3 wonderful children who exemplify these values." I watched him perform, noting how the audience leaned in, how they smiled at his practiced phrases about sacrifice and connection and unconditional love. "My daughter Joanna has shown us what family sacrifice truly means," he continued, gesturing toward me. Several heads turned. Despite her demanding career in finance, despite the pressures of her life in New York, she prioritizes family above all else. She's made this trip possible for us, brought us together during a difficult time after losing my wife, their mother, 2 years ago. She reminds me that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, about generosity, about putting others first. The audience murmured appreciation. Madison beamed from the front row filming. David stared at his water glass. I stood. The movement drew attention. Dad paused mid-sentence, confused. I walked toward the front, my tablet case in hand, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor in the sudden silence. "May I say a few words, Dad?" My voice was calm, clear, carrying across the ballroom. He blinked, caught off guard. Refusing would look suspicious, controlling. He'd built his speech around family unity. "Of course, sweetheart." I reached the front, set my tablet on the podium, and faced the audience of perhaps 80 people. "Thank you. I appreciate my father's kind words, but I think it's important that when we talk about family sacrifice, we're honest about what that really means." I connected my tablet to the projection system. The resort's AV setup was professional, easy to use. The screen behind me came to life, showing my tablet display. "This is a recording from 8 months ago," I said, my voice steady. It was captured accidentally when my phone was left recording after a meeting with our family attorney. My father and sister didn't know they were being recorded. "I'd like you to hear what family values sound like when people think no one else is listening." I pressed play. Dad's voice filled the ballroom through the sound system, crystal clear. "Eleanor's death actually helps us here if we're strategic about it. Joanna's drowning in guilt. We can see it every time she looks at photos of her mother. We can use that." The audience went still. Every fork stopped moving. Every conversation died. Madison's voice. "Use it how?" Family trips. Family emergencies. Family needs. She won't say no, not when she's this raw. And she's got that finance job now, probably clearing 6 figures easy, maybe more. The girl owes us for raising her. Time to collect. I watched the audience's faces change. Confusion shifting to understanding, understanding shifting to horror. On the screen behind me, the transcription scrolled, making sure everyone caught every word, even as the audio played. Madison in the front row had gone white, her phone still recording, capturing her own reaction in real time for her 237 live viewers who were watching her world collapse. The recording continued. Madison's admission about adding my card to Apple Pay without permission. Dad laughing about making charges bigger over time. His casual dismissal. She'll pay. She always does. After all, we gave her a roof over her head for 18 years. That's enough, Dad shouted, moving toward the podium. This is private family business. You have no right. Financial exploitation is criminal business, not private business, I said, clearly not moving, letting the recording continue to play. And I have every right to share evidence of crimes committed against me. The gala coordinator appeared with security. Other guests were standing now, some moving toward the exits, others transfixed by the drama. Madison's livestream viewer count was climbing 498, 633, 891. This was going viral in real time. David had his head in his hands. Dad stood frozen between the podium and his table, his carefully constructed image crumbling with every word that played from the speakers. The recording ended. I disconnected my tablet calmly, professionally, and looked directly at my father. You taught me that image is everything, Dad, that reputation matters, that what people think of you determines your success. I held his gaze. I learned well. Security was approaching now, along with resort management, clearly unsure what to do with this situation. The charity coordinator looked stricken, her event hijacked by family drama. I addressed her directly. I apologize for disrupting your event. The recording you just heard is currently part of an active fraud investigation. My family has been under investigation for financial crimes for the past week. I thought your guests deserved to know who they were being asked to take family values advice from. I walked off the stage through the silent ballroom past Madison, who was still holding her phone with shaking hands, past David, who wouldn't meet my eyes, past my father, who finally looked like what he was, a small, cruel man whose power had always been built on other people's silence. And I'd just ended that silence in the most public way possible. I didn't sleep that night, not from guilt or regret, but from the adrenaline of finally completely, irrevocably burning bridges that should never have been built in the first place. Around 3 a.m, I received an email from Mr. Morrison. The recording has been forwarded to appropriate authorities per your bank's fraud investigation protocols. Expect contact from law enforcement soon. You did the right thing. The contact came at 8 the next morning. A knock on my door, and I opened it to find 2 people in business casual attire holding badges. Detective Maria Santana and Detective James Chen from the St. Lucia Financial Crimes Unit, working in cooperation with U.S. authorities due to the international nature of the transactions. Ms. Hunter, we'd like to ask you some questions about the fraud complaint you filed, Detective Santana said. May we come in? I'd been preparing for this moment for days. I invited them in, offered coffee, they declined, and pulled out my laptop with every piece of evidence organized into clearly labeled folders. I have everything documented, I said, opening the first folder. Bank statements showing unauthorized charges, screenshots of my sister's social media posts acknowledging the transactions, audio recordings of conversations where my family discusses their financial exploitation, video of them arguing about the consequences, and a document my father had me sign under duress attempting to retroactively authorize the fraud. Detective Chen pulled out a notebook, but Detective Santana just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. After a moment, she said gently, Ms. Hunter, how long has this been going on? The trip charges started about 10 days ago, but the planning, I pulled up the 8-month-old recording, started at least 8 months ago, possibly longer. I played them the recording, watched their expressions harden as they heard my father casually discuss exploiting my grief herd. Madison admit to adding my card to her accounts without permission, heard them laugh about my compliance. This is premeditated, Detective Chen said, writing rapidly. This isn't opportunistic fraud, they planned this. Ms. Hunter. Detective Santana leaned forward, her voice kind but professional. I need to ask you something difficult. Has your family accessed your accounts before this trip? For smaller amounts, maybe things you noticed but dismissed. I thought about it. Probably. I've seen charges I didn't recognize over the years, but they were small enough that I assumed I'd forgotten making them, or that they were legitimate family account expenses from when my mother was sick. We'll need to go through your records for the past 2 years at minimum. This pattern using family emergency access testing with small amounts escalating to larger theft, this is textbook family financial exploitation. She paused. We see this more often than people realize. Adult children exploiting elderly parents, siblings, exploiting siblings' parents, exploiting adult children. It's one of the most underreported crimes because victims feel ashamed or guilty for reporting their own family. I don't feel guilty, I said, and realized it was true. I feel angry that it took me this long. They spent 2 hours going through my evidence, photographing documents, taking copies of recordings, asking detailed questions about my family's access to my accounts and the timeline of events. When they finally stood to leave, Detective Chen handed me his card. We're opening a formal criminal investigation. This will take time, probably several months. Your family will be notified and questioned. It might get uncomfortable. It's already uncomfortable, I said. At least now it's honestly uncomfortable. They left, and I sat in the silence of my room feeling something shift fundamentally inside me. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was a criminal case with detectives and evidence and legal consequences. There was no going back from this, no family dinner that would smooth it over, no holiday gathering where we'd pretend it never happened. Around noon, I ventured out to the pool, needing air and sun and distance from the intensity of the morning. I'd been there perhaps 20 minutes when I saw a courier walking through the resort grounds consulting a tablet, clearly looking for someone. He stopped at the lobby entrance, spoke to the concierge, then headed toward the beach where I could see my father sitting under an umbrella. I watched from behind my sunglasses as the courier approached. Dad confirmed his identity and handed him a large envelope. Dad signed for it, tipped the courier, and opened it immediately. Even from a distance, I could see the moment he understood what he was reading. His entire body went rigid. The papers shook in his hands. Other guests nearby glanced over, sensing something wrong. A subpoena. It had to be. The police had moved quickly. I looked away, picked up my book, and tried to focus on the words while my father's world continued to collapse in my peripheral vision. That evening, David found me at the resort's quiet garden bar tucked away from the main areas. He slid into the seat across from me without asking, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Joe, I need to tell you something. I waited, sensing this was important. I saw Madison access your accounts. Multiple times over the past year, maybe 18 months. Small charges, a few hundred here and there. I didn't say anything because... His voice broke slightly. Because I'm a coward. Because it was easier to pretend I didn't notice than to confront her or Dad or admit that my family was stealing from my sister. How many times? I don't know exactly. Yen 15. She'd pull up her phone at family dinners, add things to her cart using your saved payment info, laugh about how easy it was. I told myself it was harmless, that you probably wouldn't even notice, that it wasn't my business. He looked up, his eyes red. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You were paying for Mom's care while they were stealing from you, and I said nothing. Why are you telling me now? Because the detectives are going to question me. Because I'm done protecting people who don't deserve it. Because you're my sister, and I should have defended you years ago. He took a shaky breath. I'll testify if you need me to. I'll tell them everything I saw. I can't undo what I didn't do, but I can at least tell the truth now. I studied his face, seeing genuine remorse, genuine shame. David had never been malicious, just weak, and weakness in the face of abuse becomes complicity. Thank you, I said finally. That took courage. No, it didn't. Courage would have been saying something the first time I saw it happen. This is just finally doing the bare minimum of being a decent human being. We sat in silence for a moment, two siblings who'd survived the same toxic family system in completely different ways. My phone rang. Detective Santana, Ms. Hunter, we've been going through your financial records with your bank's cooperation. We found additional unauthorized charges going back 18 months. Small amounts ranging from $50 to $500 appearing consistently every few weeks. Different merchant names, but all processed through the same family account access point your sister had. My stomach dropped. 18 months of theft I'd never even noticed. How much total? Still calculating, but preliminary estimate is between $12,000 and $15,000. Combined with the trip charges, we're looking at over $40,000 in documented theft. Ms. Hunter. She paused. This is bigger than one trip. This is systematic, long-term financial exploitation. We're treating this as a serious criminal case now. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. $40,000. 3 years of my life. And I'd never even noticed, because I'd been too busy grieving my mother, building my career, trying to be the good daughter who didn't make waves or ask questions or demand accountability. David was watching me. Bad news. They found 18 months of smaller theft, $15,000 I never noticed. He closed his eyes. I saw some of those. I'm so sorry, Joe. Stop apologizing and help me make sure they face consequences. He nodded. Whatever you need. I'm done being silent. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something. An ally finally when I'd spent 37 years fighting alone. And 40,000 reasons to make absolutely certain this ended with justice, not just family reconciliation. Over the next 3 days, I watched my father disintegrate in real time. The man who'd spent my entire life projecting absolute authority and control was coming apart, and everyone could see it. I first noticed him at the beach bar at 11 in the morning, alone on his third scotch before noon. His phone was pressed to his ear, and even from a distance I could hear his raised voice. I don't care what the optics are, Michael. I need you to tell me how to fix this. No, listening to my daughter is not an option. She's the one who... Hello, Michael. He stared at the phone, apparently having been hung up on by whoever Michael was, probably a business partner. His hands were shaking as he ordered a fourth drink. By the second day, other guests were actively avoiding him. I overheard conversations in hushed tones near the pool. That's the man from the gala, isn't it? I heard his daughter exposed him for fraud. Someone said the police are involved. The resort was small enough that everyone knew everyone's business, and Dad's business was now the worst kind of public. I saw him pacing the beach at 2 in the morning when I couldn't sleep, his silhouette visible in the moonlight. His phone still clutched in his hand like a lifeline to a world that was abandoning him. The patriarch, who'd controlled his family through intimidation, was discovering that intimidation meant nothing to Banks police or public opinion. On the third evening, I was in my room reviewing emails from Mr. Morrison when someone knocked on my door. Not a polite knock, an aggressive, demanding hammering that made other guests peek out from their rooms. I checked the peephole. Dad looking disheveled in a way I'd never seen him. His shirt was wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes wild. Joanna, open this door. We need to talk. Right now. I opened it but didn't invite him in, keeping my body blocking the entrance. What do you want? To talk sense into you before you destroy this entire family. His voice was different, not authoritarian anymore, but pleading, desperate. Your mother would be heartbroken seeing what you're doing. Tearing this family apart over money, putting your own father under criminal investigation, humiliating us in front of strangers. She raised you better than this. The invocation of Mom was almost reflexive at this point, his last remaining weapon. But I'd been waiting for this moment. Come in, I said, stepping aside. There's something you need to see. He entered warily, probably expecting a trap. I pulled out my laptop, opened Mom's video message, and turned the screen toward him. Watch. Mom's face appeared weak but determined, speaking from her deathbed. Joe, if you're receiving this, it means they've done exactly what I feared. I watched Dad's face as he listened to his dead wife explain how she'd witnessed his financial control tactics, how she'd understood the toxic family dynamics he'd created, how she'd established a secret trust fund specifically to protect me from him, His expression cycled through disbelief, shock, and something that might have been shame. When Mom said, "I couldn't protect you while I lived under his roof, but I can protect you now." Dad actually flinched. The video ended. Silence filled the room. "She knew what you were, Dad," I said quietly. "She just couldn't say it while alive. But she made sure I'd know. She made sure I'd have resources. She made sure I'd understand that none of this was my imagination." He opened his mouth closed. It opened it again. No words came. For perhaps the first time in his life, Henry Hunter had nothing to say. "You need to leave now," I told him. He left without another word, walking like a man who'd just had his entire self-concept shattered. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Then another. Then another. A long, rambling stream of consciousness that revealed more about her psychology than she probably intended. "Joe, I'm sorry, but you're taking this way too far. Yes, we used your card, but family helps each other. That's what family means. You're being selfish, making this into some huge legal thing when we could have just talked about it like adults. I'm scared, Joe, the police want to question me and I don't know what to say. But you should be scared too because you're destroying Dad and that's on you. He's having a breakdown and it's your fault. Mom would have wanted us to forgive each other and move on, but you're choosing revenge over family. I can't believe you played that recording at the gala that was cruel and vindictive and so unlike you. Or maybe it is like you. Maybe this is who you really are, someone who values money over relationships. I thought we were closer than this. I thought you loved me, but I guess I was wrong about everything." The message went on for several more paragraphs, each one contradicting the previous cycling between apology and accusation, fear and blame, self-pity and anger. Reading it was like watching someone's psychological defense mechanisms collapse in real time. I took screenshots of the entire exchange, added them to my evidence folder labeled Family Communications, and then did something I should have done years ago. I blocked her number. The relief was immediate. No more manipulation disguised as apology. No more emotional terrorism wrapped in family loyalty. No more access to me at all. I was setting boundaries, and boundaries felt like freedom. My phone rang. The resort's front desk, their voice apologetic. "Ms. Hunter, I'm sorry to disturb you, but your father is in the hallway outside your room. He's been there for about 20 minutes. Other guests have complained. He's not being aggressive, but he's refusing to leave. Should we call security to intervene?" I looked through the peephole. Dad was sitting on the floor outside my door, his back against the wall, his head in his hands. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Broken. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something like pity. Then I remembered $40,000, 18 months of theft, 8 months of planning, Mom's medical bills I'd paid alone, 37 years of being treated as a resource instead of a daughter. "Yes," I told the front desk. "Please have security remove him, and make a note that he's not to be given access to this hallway again." "Of course, Ms. Hunter. We'll take care of it immediately." I watched through the peephole as 2 security officers approached him, helped him to his feet, and escorted him away. He didn't look back. After security escorted Dad away, I called Mr. Morrison and recounted the evening's events. Dad's breakdown, the text message from Madison, the attempted guilt manipulation using Mom's memory that had backfired so spectacularly. "The investigation is solid," he told me. "The police have everything they need. Your family's attorneys will likely advise them to settle and avoid trial. But Joanna, there's something else you should consider. The public narrative is still being written. Right now, only the people at that resort know what really happened. If you want to ensure this doesn't get twisted into a story about an ungrateful daughter destroying her family, you might want to tell your side. Publicly, carefully, factually, without naming names if you prefer. But yes, control the narrative before someone else does." I spent the next day thinking about it. Then I did something I'd never done before. I created a TikTok account. Not under my real name, but anonymous enough for plausible deniability, while clear enough that anyone who knew the situation would recognize the story. I kept the video simple. 3 minutes carefully edited. It opened with text on screen. When family becomes financial fraud, a true story. I showed screenshots of unauthorized charges with amounts visible, but account numbers blurred. I included clips from Madison's Instagram, her posts about the amazing sister who made this dream vacation possible, the villa photos, the champagne toasts, all public content she'd posted herself. I added a calm voiceover explaining financial abuse in families, how it starts small, how guilt and obligation are weaponized, how victims often don't report it because of shame. I didn't name anyone, didn't show faces, just facts, amounts, and the psychological tactics used. The video ended with simple text. Family isn't an excuse for theft. Love isn't measured in how much you'll tolerate being used. I posted it at 11 p.m. titled, "When Family Becomes Financial Fraud," and went to sleep expecting maybe a few hundred views by morning. I woke up to 127,000 views. By noon, it had passed 500,000. The comments were overwhelming. This happened to me with my mother. I paid her rent for 3 years before realizing she was gambling it away. My brother stole $55K from me using old account access. Thank you for talking about this. Family financial abuse is so common and nobody talks about it. Sending this to my therapist. I needed to hear I'm not crazy. Financial advice accounts were duetting the video, adding their own commentary about protecting yourself from family fraud. Family therapists were stitching it, explaining the psychology of family exploitation. Lawyers were breaking down the legal aspects in response videos. By the second day, it had 2 million views and climbing. And then people started finding Madison's Instagram. The connection wasn't hard. The resort photos matched my screenshots, the timelines aligned, and internet sleuths are relentless. Comments began appearing on her old vacation posts. Is this the sister from the TikTok? Did your sister pay for this trip? This you committing fraud? Imagine exploiting your own family and posting about it. Madison's follower count started dropping. 47,000 became 45,000, then 42,000, then 38,000. Her carefully curated influencer persona, the grateful sister, the family-oriented lifestyle blogger, was disintegrating as people realized it was built on theft. She tried damage control, posting a story. There are always 2 sides to every story. Family matters are private and complex. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time. But that only made it worse. Comments flooded in, privacy. You made it public when you posted all those vacation photos. 2 sides. Pretty sure fraud only has 1 side. Taking down your posts now, screenshots are forever. The 3rd day I got a call from David. Joe Madison got fired. What? From that PR firm she worked for part-time. They called it conduct incompatible with company values. Her boss saw the TikTok, put it together with her Instagram, and terminated her this morning. They released a statement saying they don't employ people under criminal investigation. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction that there were consequences, but also something uncomfortable. Not quite guilt, but an awareness of the power I was wielding. There's more, David continued. Dad's lost 3 major clients this week. The Highland Properties deal fell through. The Riverside Development Partnership dissolved. His business partners are removing his name from joint ventures. Nobody wants to be associated with someone under fraud investigation, especially when it's gone viral. How is he? Not good. He's barely leaving his room, stopped answering calls. I think he's finally realizing that his reputation, the thing he valued more than any relationship, is gone. We sat in silence for a moment, 2 siblings witnessing the consequences of truth-telling in real time. That evening, my phone buzzed with an email from a producer at a major cable news network, Ms. Hunter. We've been following the story of family financial fraud that's gained significant attention on social media this week. We believe we've identified you as the victim in this case and would like to offer you an opportunity to share your story in a nationally televised interview. Financial abuse within families is a growing concern, and your experience could help thousands of people who face similar situations. Would you be interested in discussing this opportunity? We can guarantee editorial control and anonymity if you prefer. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. This was bigger than I'd anticipated. What had started as controlling my own narrative was becoming something else, a public conversation about an issue nobody wanted to talk about. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from a podcast about family dynamics, then another from a financial advice website, then a request from a victims advocacy organization. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was becoming a symbol, a catalyst for conversations happening in living rooms and therapist offices and legal consultations across the country. I thought about Mom's video about her telling me I wasn't obligated to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I thought about the comments on my TikTok from people who'd never had permission to protect themselves from family exploitation. And I thought about Madison losing her influencer income and Dad losing his business reputation, and whether I felt guilty about that. I didn't. Not even a little. They'd made their choices. They'd stolen from me, planned it in advance, laughed about my compliance, and when caught, they'd tried every manipulation tactic they knew to avoid consequences. The consequences weren't my doing. They were the natural result of their own actions finally meeting reality. I opened the email from the news network and typed a reply. "I'm interested. Let's talk." The news interview was scheduled for the following week, which gave me time to return to New York and prepare. But before I could leave St. Lucia, Mr. Morrison called with unexpected news. "Henry's attorney has requested a meeting. He wants to discuss settlement terms. I think they're panicking, the viral video, the media attention, the business consequences. They want this to go away." "When?" "Tomorrow, if you're willing. He's flying down specifically for this." That alone tells you how desperate they are. The meeting was arranged at a law office in the main town neutral territory away from the resort. I arrived with Mr. Morrison to find Henry's attorney already there, a man in his 60s named Richard Caldwell, expensive suit-tired eyes. He looked like someone who'd spent the past week trying to control an uncontrollable situation. "Ms. Hunter, thank you for meeting with me." He began, his tone professionally courteous but strained. "I'll be direct. My client is prepared to offer full restitution plus substantial additional compensation in exchange for a mutual release and non-disclosure agreement." He slid a document across the table. I scanned it quickly, $28,000 in repayment for the trip charges, plus $50,000 for emotional distress and inconvenience, totaling $78,000. In exchange, I would sign an NDA, drop all criminal complaints request, that the police close their investigation and issue a public statement characterizing the situation as a family misunderstanding that has been resolved amicably. "That's a generous offer," Mr. Morrison said carefully, doing his job by presenting it neutrally. I cut him off. My silence was never for sale. Caldwell blinked. "Ms. Hunter, $78,000 is significantly more than the actual damages. This would compensate you fairly while allowing your family to move forward with dignity. Their dignity isn't my responsibility, and this isn't about money, it never was." "Then what is it about?" He leaned forward, genuinely puzzled. "What do you want?" "Accountability. Consequences. Recognition that what they did was criminal, not a misunderstanding. I want other people who are being exploited by their families to see that they can say no, that they can fight back, that they don't have to accept abuse just because it comes from relatives. That's very idealistic, but if I take this money and stay quiet, nothing changes. My father will learn that he can buy his way out of consequences. Madison will learn that theft is fine as long as you apologize when caught. And thousands of people watching this story will learn that family exploitation works if you have enough money to make the victim shut up." Mr. Morrison was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Caldwell looked less comfortable. "Ms. Hunter, I understand your position, but you should know that refusing this offer means continued litigation. The criminal investigation will proceed. Your family relationships will be permanently damaged. The media attention will intensify. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing for this my entire life. I just didn't know it until recently. I need to confer with my client about your rejection. I'm not rejecting it privately, I interrupted. I'm going to post about it publicly. People following this story deserve to know that I was offered money to stay silent and that I refused. Caldwell's professional composure cracked slightly. That would be inadvisable. It could prejudice potential jury pools influence the investigation. Or it could show other victims that they have options beyond accepting settlements that protect their abusers. I stood gathering my things. Tell my father that accountability isn't negotiable. Tell Madison that Instagram apologies don't erase theft. And tell yourself that you're representing people who plan to exploit a grieving daughter and got caught. Mr. Morrison and I left. In the car, he was quiet for a moment before saying, "That was either very brave or very foolish. Possibly both." Which do you think? I think you're the first client I've ever had who turned down nearly $80,000 on principle. Your mother would be proud. That evening, I posted from my TikTok account, "Update, I've been offered $78,000 to sign an NDA, drop criminal complaints, and publicly call this a misunderstanding. I'm refusing. My silence was never for sale. Accountability matters more than settlement checks. Truth matters more than family reputation." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments poured in within minutes. "This is integrity. Thank you for not letting them buy their way out. You're giving voice to everyone who's been silenced." My phone rang. "Mr. Morrison. Caldwell just called me. He's furious. Said you're making this impossible to resolve quietly." "Good," I said. "That's exactly the point." He also said, and this is a direct quote, "If she won't settle, we're prepared to make this very ugly in court. Tell her she'll regret refusing this offer." I smiled at my phone. "Tell him I've spent 37 years regretting staying silent. I'm done with regrets." After we hung up, I sat on my hotel balcony watching the Caribbean sunset, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades: certainty. Not just that I was right, but that I was finally completely, irrevocably done being the person my family needed me to be. I was becoming the person my mother had hoped I could be, and that was worth more than any settlement check could ever buy. I flew back to New York 2 days later, leaving the Caribbean paradise that had become a battlefield. The resort staff were kind during checkout, carefully not mentioning the drama that had unfolded on their property. I suspected I'd become a cautionary tale in their employee training how to handle guests whose family vacation turns into a criminal investigation. David had left the day before me separately, avoiding any final confrontation with Dad or Madison. We'd exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch, but I wasn't sure what that meant yet. Trust once broken by years of silence doesn't rebuild overnight. I'd been home for 3 days, settling back into my apartment and work routine, when David texted, "Can we meet? I have something important to give you. Coffee shop on 82nd and Amsterdam. Tomorrow at 10. The cafe was busy with the morning rush when I arrived, but David had claimed a corner table away from the crowd. He looked worse than he had in St. Lucia, thinner, dark circles under his eyes, the appearance of someone carrying weight they could no longer bear. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because I've been a coward for years and you have every right to hate me for that." He pulled a small USB drive from his jacket pocket and set it on the table between us. "I've been going through my old emails and texts, stuff I saved over the years but tried not to think about. Joe, I have evidence. 3 years' worth of conversations between Dad and Madison planning how to exploit you." I stared at the drive. "Why did you keep them?" "I don't know. Maybe part of me always knew this was wrong, that someday someone would need proof. Or maybe I'm just a pack rat who never deletes anything. But they're all here: emails, screenshots of text conversations, even a few recordings from family dinners where they discussed their strategies." "Have you looked through them?" "Every single one. Last few nights couldn't sleep, went through everything chronologically." His voice cracked slightly. It's worse than you think. They were systematic about it. Madison asking Dad, "How much do you think we can get from Joe this year?" Like you were a resource to be allocated. Discussions about which charges to hide, how to emotionally manipulate you. There's one email from Dad that says, "Joanna is too proud to admit she's being used. Use her pride against her." The words hit harder than I expected. Hearing about their planning was one thing. Having documentary evidence of it was another. Why are you giving this to me? Because it's the right thing to do. Because I should have done it years ago. Because watching Dad and Madison refuse to take any responsibility, watching them act like victims when they're the perpetrators, I finally couldn't live with myself anymore. He pushed the USB drive across the table. "It's all yours. Give it to your attorney, the police, whoever needs it. I'll testify to everything I witnessed. I'll explain my own complicity and cowardice if that helps your case. I'm done protecting people who don't deserve it." I picked up the drive, this tiny piece of technology that apparently contained years of documented conspiracy. "Madison's going to hate you for this." "She already does. She found out I'd been talking to you and sent me a text last night." He pulled out his phone, showed me the message. "You've chosen her over your real family. Dad will never forgive you. I hope your conscience is worth being alone for the rest of your life." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She's wrong anyway. I'm not choosing you over family. I'm choosing what's right over what's comfortable. I should have done it when Mom was alive. Maybe she'd have been proud of me for once." We sat in silence for a moment, two siblings finally on the same side after a lifetime of being divided by the family dynamics that had warped us both. "Thank you," I said finally. "This matters. A lot. Use it well. Make sure they can't hurt anyone else." After he left, I sat there holding the USB drive, feeling the weight of what it represented. Then I called Mr. Morrison and arranged an emergency meeting for that afternoon. He plugged the drive into his laptop and opened the first folder. I watched his expression change as he read through the emails, professional neutrality giving way to something closer to disgust. "How many emails are there?" I asked. 47 in the first folder alone. There are 6 folders. He kept scrolling, clicking, reading. After 20 minutes, he looked up. "Joanna, this just became an open and shut case. This isn't circumstantial anymore. This is documented conspiracy spanning 3 years. They're finished." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired and free. Finally, definitively free. "Good," I said. "Let's finish this." Mr. Morrison submitted David's evidence to both the police and the bank's fraud investigation unit. Detective Santana called 2 days later to confirm they'd received it and that the case against Henry and Madison was now substantially stronger. "This is textbook conspiracy to commit fraud," she said. "The documented planning, the coordination, the deliberate exploitation of grief, it's all here in writing." I was beginning to think the worst was over, that the evidence phase was complete, and all that remained was waiting for the legal system to process it. Then, on a Thursday evening, while I was making dinner in my apartment, my phone rang from an unknown number with a New York area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Aunt Joe." A young voice, uncertain and scared. It took me a moment to place it. "Emma." "Yeah, I'm calling from my friend Chloe's phone. Mom doesn't know." Madison's daughter, 12 years old, the one person in this entire mess I'd been trying not to think about because children shouldn't be caught in adult warfare. "Is everything okay? Are you safe?" "I'm safe, but I needed to call you. Aunt Joe, I'm so sorry for what my mom did. She told me you were being mean to the family, that you were trying to hurt Grandpa. But I found something, and now I know she was lying." My heart clenched. "Emma, you don't need to apologize for your mother's actions." "But I believed her. I thought you were the bad one. And then I found her journal. She keeps it in her nightstand, and I read it because I wanted to understand what was happening, and—" Her voice broke. "She wrote terrible things. About how to trick you and use you and make you feel guilty. She knew exactly what she was doing." "Emma, where are you right now?" "At Chloe's house. I took pictures of the journal pages before Mom could hide them. Can I send them to you because it's wrong, Aunt Joe? What she did is wrong and I don't want to be like her. This 12-year-old child had more moral courage than any adult in my family. Yes, send them to me, but Emma, your mom is going to be very angry when she finds out. I know, but lying is bad, right? That's what she always taught me. And she's been lying about everything. The photos arrived via text minutes later, pages from Madison's journal in her distinctive handwriting. I read entries that made my stomach turn. Dad says Joe will pay if we play the family card. She's so desperate to belong. And the guilt about Mom's death makes her easy to control, strike while she's vulnerable. And Joe's too proud to admit she's being used. That pride is our biggest asset. These weren't spontaneous thoughts. These were strategies, calculations, evidence of full consciousness and intent. Madison had documented her own crime perhaps because she never imagined anyone would see it, or because she genuinely didn't believe what she was doing was wrong. I was forwarding the photos to Mr. Morrison when Emma called back, but this time I could hear yelling in the background. "She found out," Emma whispered urgently. "She's coming." The phone cut off. I immediately called back but got voicemail. I tried Madison's number despite having blocked it, unblocking just long enough to call. She answered on the first ring, her voice shrill with fury. "How dare you? How dare you turn my own daughter against me? Where is Emma? Is she okay?" "She's fine. No thanks to you. She betrayed her own mother because of the poison you've been spreading. She stole from me, photographed my private journal. The journal where you documented financial fraud. That's my private property, my private thoughts. You had no right." Emma has every right to understand that her mother is a thief and a liar. Maybe she'll learn something you never did, integrity. I could hear Emma crying in the background, Madison shouting at her. "How dare you side with her against me? I'm your mother." "I'm coming over," I said. "You are not welcome in my home." I hung up and called a car. Madison lived in Queens, about 30 minutes away. I made it in 25, finding their apartment building in chaos. Emma sitting on the front steps, crying, Madison screaming from the doorway, neighbors watching from windows. I walked past Madison without acknowledging her and sat down next to Emma, putting my arm around the sobbing child. "Aunt Jo didn't do anything wrong," Emma said through tears, looking up at her mother. "You did. And you taught me that lying is bad, but that's all you've done. You lied about Aunt Jo. You lied about the money. You lied about everything." Madison stood frozen, her fury meeting her daughter's truth and finding no response. "You taught your daughter that loyalty means silence," I said to Madison, pulling Emma closer. "I'll teach her that honesty means strength." "You've turned my own child against me," Madison shrieked. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not my sister, but a stranger who'd worn a sister's face while plotting against me for years. "No, Madison," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." Emma came to stay with me for 3 days while Madison dealt with what she called a crisis of betrayal, but what was actually a crisis of consequences. I set Emma up in my guest room, ordered takeout, and let her talk about everything she'd been holding inside, how she'd known something was wrong with the family dynamics, but couldn't name it, how she'd felt caught between loving her mother and knowing her mother was lying. "Is she going to jail?" Emma asked on the second night, her voice small. "I don't know yet. Probably not, but there will be consequences." "Good," Emma said, then immediately looked guilty for saying it. "It's okay to want people to face consequences, even when you love them," I told her. "Maybe especially when you love them." 2 weeks later, Mr. Morrison called with news. "The prosecutor is recommending mediation rather than trial. With David's testimony, your 8-month recording, Emma's journal photos, and Madison's own social media confessions, they know they can't win. Henry's attorney is desperate to avoid criminal conviction, and the prosecutor thinks mediation will achieve justice faster than a lengthy trial." The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the county courthouse. I arrived with Mr. Morrison to find a conference room that felt deliberately intimidating, windowless fluorescent lighting, a long table with the court-appointed mediator at the head. Henry and Madison sat on one side with their attorney, Richard Caldwell. David sat separately, technically neutral, but clearly aligned with me by his presence. The mediator was a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Walsh, retired from the bench and now specializing in civil mediation. She had the air of someone who'd seen every type of family dysfunction and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Let's be clear about where we are," she began without preamble. "Ms. Joanna Hunter has documented evidence of systematic financial fraud spanning 3 years. We have premeditated planning captured on audio. We have written confessions in journal form. We have witness testimony from a family member. We have public social media admissions. And we have unauthorized charges exceeding $40,000. She looked at Caldwell. "What's your defense?" "My clients acknowledge that mistakes were made." "Crimes," Judge Walsh interrupted. "Crimes were committed. Let's not minimize with euphemisms. The question is whether we resolve this through mediation with agreed-upon consequences or whether this proceeds to criminal trial where your clients face potential conviction, jail time, and permanent criminal records. Which would you prefer?" Caldwell glanced at Henry, whose face had gone gray. "Mediation." The terms were negotiated over 4 hours. Joanna's attorney presented a detailed accounting, $28,000, in fraudulent trip charges, $12,000, in additional unauthorized charges over 18 months, totaling $40,000 in documented theft. The prosecutor wanted full restitution, plus punitive damages. Judge Walsh established the final terms. Henry and Madison would jointly pay $50,000, the $40,000 in restitution, plus $10,000 in punitive damages. They would complete a financial crimes education program. They would perform 200 hours of community service at organizations serving fraud victims. They would remain on probation for 2 years, during which any similar behavior would result in immediate criminal charges. A restraining order would prevent them from accessing any of Joanna's financial accounts, and all contact must go through attorneys unless Joanna explicitly permitted otherwise. "Sign here," Judge Walsh said, sliding the agreement across the table. Henry's hand shook as he picked up the pen. He looked older than his 68 years, diminished by consequences he'd never imagined facing. Madison signed without looking up, tears sliding down her face. The settlement became public record that afternoon. By evening, local news had picked it up. Westchester businessman settles family fraud investigation. The article detailed the charges, the settlement amount, the probation terms. Henry's business was named. Madison's Instagram handle was mentioned. Mr. Morrison called that evening. "It's done. The money will be transferred within 30 days. The restraining order is active immediately. You're legally protected now." As I hung up, I realized I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted, relieved, and strangely empty. This had been my life for months, the evidence gathering, the confrontations, the legal process. And now it was over. Not resolved exactly, but finished. I thought about everything that had led to this moment, every boundary I'd finally enforced, every time I'd chosen myself over their comfort. And I thought about what I'd told Henry as we left the courthouse. His face gray with humiliation, Madison refusing to meet my eyes. "You taught me to be strong, Dad," I'd said quietly as he signed the final papers. "You just didn't expect me to be strong against you." He hadn't responded. There was nothing left to say. The war was over. Now I had to figure out what peace looked like. 3 days after the mediation, a certified letter arrived at my apartment requiring signature. The return address was Mr. Morrison's law office, but the envelope inside was older, yellowed, slightly at the edges, with my name written in Mom's distinctive handwriting. I sat on my couch for several minutes before opening it, knowing that whatever was inside would be significant. Mom had planned too carefully for this to be anything ordinary. The letter was dated 2 weeks before she died, written in the shaky script of someone whose hands no longer fully obeyed. "My dearest Joe," it began, "if you're reading this, the trust fund has been activated, and you've begun to understand what I tried to protect you from. But there's one more thing I need to tell you, one final truth that might help you find peace. The trust contains $500,000, not $400,000. I lied in the video, a small deception for a larger purpose. The full amount is yours, Joe. Every penny. But I'm giving you a choice that's really a gift, though you might not see it that way at first. You can claim the entire amount and never speak to your siblings again. Or you can offer David and Madison $100,000 to split between them with one condition. They must each write you a letter explaining why they believe they deserve this money given everything that has happened between you. Whatever they write or don't write will show you their true hearts. Their words will be their confession, their character made visible. And then you'll know with absolute certainty who deserves your energy, your forgiveness, your future relationship. This isn't about the money, sweetheart. It's about giving you permission to see them clearly without guilt or obligation clouding your vision. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is clarity. The choice is yours. Trust your judgment. I always have. All my love, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, feeling the layers of what Mom had done. She'd created a final test not of their worthiness, but of my clarity. A way for me to see conclusively who they were when given one last chance to show remorse or growth or basic human decency. After 2 days of consideration, I decided to honor Mom's design. I had Mr. Morrison send formal letters to David and Madison. Eleanor Hunter's trust includes a provision allowing $100,000 to be divided between David and Madison Hunter, subject to one condition. Each must submit a written letter explaining why they believe they deserve this money given the events of the past year. Letters must be received within 7 days. David's response arrived the next morning, clearly written in the middle of a sleepless night. Joe, it began, I don't deserve this money. I don't deserve your forgiveness either. I watched them exploit you for years and said nothing because I was afraid of Dad's anger of being cut off, of having to choose between comfort and courage. I chose wrong every time. If you decide to give me any portion of this money, I'd use it to create an education trust for Emma, managed by an independent trustee, so she has resources that don't depend on her mother's manipulation or my cowardice. But honestly, if you kept it all, I'd understand. I'd deserve that too. I'm sorry for every time I stayed silent. David. Madison's letter arrived on day 7, pushed to the deadline. Joanna, I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I believe I deserve this money because I've suffered too. You've destroyed my reputation, ruined Dad's business, turned my own daughter against me. My career is over, my social media following is gone, and I have legal fees I can't pay. This money would help me rebuild my life after everything you've taken from me. I know we had our disagreements about the vacation expenses, but family is supposed to forgive. Mom would have wanted us to move past this. The fact that she left money that could be shared shows she wanted us to stay together. This is the least you can do after everything I've lost because of your refusal to handle things privately. Madison. I read both letters twice, then pulled out Mom's original note. There was a final paragraph I hadn't noticed before, written in even shakier handwriting, as if she'd added it at the very end. Their letters will tell you everything, Joe. David may surprise you. He has a conscience buried under fear. Madison will reveal she's learned nothing, that she sees herself as victim rather than perpetrator. Use this knowledge not for revenge, but for peace. You'll know who deserves your energy going forward. You'll know who can grow and who is determined to stay exactly as they are. And then, my darling girl, you can finally let go of the ones who will never see you clearly. That's my final gift to you, permission to walk away without guilt. I love you. Always. Mom. I sat on my couch holding both letters and Mom's note, understanding finally what she'd done. This wasn't a test of whether my siblings deserved money. It was a demonstration of who they were, written in their own words so clear that even I, after 37 years of making excuses for them, couldn't deny it anymore. David had conscience. Madison had none. David could grow. Madison was determined to remain a victim of her own consequences. David deserved a chance. Madison deserved exactly what she'd gotten. Mom gave me permission to let them go. I whispered to the empty apartment, feeling something unlock in my chest that had been closed since childhood. Permission. That's what this had all been about. Permission to protect myself. Permission to demand accountability. Permission to walk away from people who would never value me properly. And now, finally, permission to be free. I spent a week thinking about Mom's test and what it revealed. David's letters sat on my desk, his honesty and self-awareness evident in every line. Madison's sat in a drawer. I couldn't bear to look at it more than once. The victimhood, the complete lack of accountability, the audacity to claim she deserved money after everything she'd done. It was almost impressive in its total absence of self-reflection. My decision came not from anger, but from clarity. I had Mr. Morrison draft 2 letters. The first went to David. I'm establishing a $75,000 education trust for Emma, managed by an independent trustee. The money will be available for her college vocational training or other educational expenses when she turns 18. You'll have no direct access to it, but you'll receive annual reports on the fund's status. This isn't forgiveness, but it's recognition that you're trying to do better. Keep trying. The second went to Madison. Your letter demonstrated exactly why Mom knew you weren't ready for this gift. You see yourself as a victim of my actions rather than the perpetrator of your own choices. When you understand what you did wrong, truly understand, not just perform understanding to get what you want, we can talk. Until then, my answer is no. David called me crying when he received his letter. Thank you. I don't deserve this, but Emma does. I promise I'll be someone worthy of your trust eventually. Madison's response came via a voicemail so vitriolic that I deleted it halfway through. Something about me being a vindictive bitch who'll die alone. I blocked her number again and felt nothing but relief. The remaining money, $425,000 from Mom's trust, plus the $50,000 settlement, became the Eleanor Hunter Foundation. I spent 3 months working with attorneys and financial advisors to structure it properly, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to supporting victims of family financial abuse. The foundation would offer free legal consultations, financial counseling, educational workshops, and emergency grants for people trapped in situations similar to mine. I recruited a board of directors, including a family law attorney, a financial therapist, and a social worker who specialized in elder abuse. We established partnerships with legal aid societies, domestic violence organizations, and financial literacy nonprofits. The foundation would be small-focused and sustainable, helping maybe 50 families a year rather than trying to save the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. Madison's theft had funded an organization dedicated to preventing exactly what she'd done. Her punishment wasn't just losing the money, it was watching that money help others, watching me build something meaningful from the wreckage she'd created. The foundation's website went live in October, 6 months after that catastrophic vacation. Within a week, we received 200 requests for help. The stories were heartbreaking and familiar. Adult children draining elderly parents' accounts, siblings stealing inheritances, parents exploiting their successful children's guilt and obligation. Every story echoed pieces of my own. We couldn't help everyone, but we helped who we could. A woman whose brother had stolen her settlement from a car accident. A man whose wife refused to let him access their joint accounts. An elderly woman whose daughter had forged her signature on a reverse mortgage. Each case reinforced what I'd learned. Family financial abuse thrives in silence, in the shame victims feel about admitting their own relatives are exploiting them. I served as board director, but operated mostly behind the scenes, using my finance background to ensure sustainability rather than being the public face. The foundation was about the cause, not about me. Though occasionally I'd speak at events sharing my story without names, explaining how patterns of control and guilt manipulation enable financial exploitation. One evening, after a particularly draining board meeting, I drafted a final letter. This one went to Dad, sent through Mr. Morrison to ensure I'd never have to hear his response directly. Dad, I don't hate you. Hate requires energy I'm no longer willing to spend on you. But I won't have a relationship with you unless fundamental changes occur. Those changes include acknowledging what you did was wrong without qualification or excuse, completing genuine therapy with a licensed professional who specializes in narcissistic and controlling behaviors, and making a sincere apology not just to me, but to Mom's memory for how you treated both of us during her life and after her death. Until and unless those things happen, we have nothing to discuss. This isn't negotiable. This isn't a conversation. This is my boundary, Joanna, Mr. Morrison called after sending it. He won't respond well to this. I don't need him to respond well. I need him to know the door is closed unless he does the work to deserve it being opened. Henry never responded. According to David, who maintained sporadic contact with our father, Henry showed the letter to his remaining friends and complained about my unreasonable demands and continued vendetta. He'd learned nothing, changed nothing. And I felt nothing about that except a sad sort of peace. David, meanwhile, was trying. He'd started therapy on his own. He sent me updates about Emma, how she was doing in school, how she asked about me, how Madison barely acknowledged her daughter's existence now that Emma had betrayed her. We met for coffee once a month, rebuilding trust slowly through consistent actions rather than grand gestures. It wasn't the sibling relationship either of us had imagined, but it was honest, and that mattered more. Madison blocked me on all remaining social media platforms after the foundation launched. She couldn't face evidence of what she could have been if she'd chosen accountability over victimhood. According to David, she'd moved to her boyfriend's place in New Jersey and was working retail, her influencer dreams permanently dead. She blamed me for all of it, refused therapy, and spent her days nursing grievances instead of growth. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't feel responsible for her. That was progress. 6 months after the foundation launched, an envelope arrived at my apartment, not to the foundation, but to my personal address. The handwriting on the outside was shaky, barely legible, nothing like Dad's usually aggressive scrawl. The return address showed a facility in Connecticut I didn't recognize. I looked it up: Greenwood Recovery Center, specializing in addiction treatment and psychological rehabilitation. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it, knowing that whatever was inside would either be the beginning of something new or the final confirmation that some people truly never change. Finally, I opened it. Joanna, it began in that trembling handwriting. I'm writing from a treatment center where I've been for the past 3 months. I took a breath and kept reading, unsure whether I was about to read an apology or another manipulation, but ready either way. Ready finally for whatever truth was coming. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in that shaking script that looked nothing like the aggressive, confident penmanship I remembered from childhood. I sat at my kitchen table and read it slowly, trying to hear the words without the filter of decades of distrust. Joanna, I'm writing from a treatment center for people with control issues and narcissistic personality patterns. After losing my business, my reputation, and my family, I finally admitted I needed help. Rock bottom came when David stopped returning my calls, and I realized I was completely alone, not because of your vindictiveness as I'd been telling myself, but because I'd driven everyone away through my own behavior. My therapist has helped me see what I refused to acknowledge for 68 years: I was abusive. Not with fists, but with control and manipulation. I used money as a weapon. I used your mother's love as leverage. I used guilt and obligation to keep you compliant. Your mother tried to tell me years ago, tried to make me see what I was doing, and I dismissed her concerns as emotional overreaction. I destroyed our family because I couldn't let anyone exist outside my control. When you succeeded independently, it threatened my authority, so I found ways to diminish you. When you set boundaries, I called it betrayal. When you demanded accountability, I called it vindictive. I was wrong about all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I probably don't deserve the time it takes you to read this letter. But my therapist says that amends require acknowledgement without expectation of absolution. So here's my acknowledgement. You were right. About everything. I'm sorry. It took losing everything to see it. Henry. I read it 3 times. looking for manipulation for the subtle guilt trips and conditional apologies that had characterized every previous attempt at reconciliation. But I couldn't find them. The letter felt genuine in its brokenness, in its lack of self-justification. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say, and I wasn't ready to trust that this change was real rather than strategic. So I filed the letter away and returned to my life, to the foundation work, to the slow rebuilding of my sense of self. 2 weeks later, my phone rang at 6 a.m. The rehabilitation center, a nurse's voice, professional but gentle. Ms. Hunter, your father has suffered a severe stroke. He's been transported to Stanford Hospital. The doctors have asked us to notify family. His condition is critical. I should have felt something: panic, grief, even satisfaction that karma had found him. Instead, I felt only a strange calm, as if I'd been waiting for this call without knowing it. I'll be there in 2 hours. I drove to Connecticut in early morning traffic, my mind oddly quiet. Not racing with worry or rehearsing what I'd say. Just present, witnessing each mile pass, accepting that this was happening whether I was ready or not. The hospital was modern and clean, the ICU filled with the sounds of machines maintaining lives too fragile to maintain themselves. A doctor met me outside Dad's room, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the careful demeanor of someone about to deliver bad news. The stroke was massive. He's conscious intermittently, but the damage is extensive. We're keeping him comfortable, but realistically we're looking at days, possibly hours. Can I see him? Of course. He's been asking for Joanna when he's lucid. The room was dim, just the glow of monitors and the soft beep of heart rate tracking. Dad looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. His face was slack on one side, his breathing labored, IV lines running into both arms. I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. His eyes opened after a moment, unfocused at first, then finding me with effort. Anna. The word was slurred, barely intelligible, pushed out with tremendous effort. I'm here, Dad. I was wrong. Each word cost him. You're like your mother. Strong. Something in my chest cracked open. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. He'd spent his life seeing strength as something to control, and now at the end he finally understood it as something to admire. I took his hand, feeling how fragile it was, how the man who'd dominated my childhood had become someone who could barely speak. I forgive you, Dad. The words surprised me as I spoke them. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I forgive you. His eyes filled with tears, the first time I'd ever seen him cry. He squeezed my hand with what little strength remained, and then his eyes closed. The heart monitor continued its steady beep, but I knew somehow that the essential part of him, the consciousness that had finally glimpsed truth, was already letting go. He died that night at 11:47 p.m. I wasn't there. I'd gone home to sleep, to process, to sit with the complicated grief of losing a father I'd never really had, but had always wanted. The hospital called at midnight. I thanked them and sat in my dark apartment, crying not for what I'd lost, but for what had never been, and now never could be. The funeral was small. Henry's business associates had largely abandoned him, his friends uncomfortable with the scandal. David arranged everything with quiet efficiency, consulting me on details, but not expecting me to take charge. Madison attended, dressed in black, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses. She sat in the back and left immediately after the service without speaking to anyone. David told me later she'd said attending was the bare minimum of respect, but that she still blamed me for Dad's downfall. Some people never change. Even death doesn't teach them. David delivered the eulogy, his voice steady but sad. Dad was complicated. He built a successful business but damaged his family. He provided financially but impoverished us emotionally. In his final weeks, he tried to face what he'd done, to acknowledge his failures. I hope he found peace at the end. I hope we all do. I didn't speak, but I placed something on the casket before they closed it. Mom's photograph, the one from my desk, her smile gentle and knowing. A quiet statement that his wife's memory had witnessed his final accounting, his last attempt at redemption. After the service, several of Dad's old friends approached me hesitantly. "We should have said something years ago," one man told me. "We saw how he treated you differently, but we told ourselves it wasn't our business." I appreciated the acknowledgement, even if it came too late to matter. As people filtered away from the gravesite, I felt a small hand slip into mine. Emma, 13, now taller than when I'd last seen her, her eyes red from crying. "Aunt Jo, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Can I stay with you sometimes? Like regularly, I don't want to become like them, like Mom and Grandpa. I'm scared I will if I stay there all the time." I looked at this brave child who'd chosen truth over family loyalty, who'd risked everything to do what was right, and I saw the person I wished I'd been at her age. "Yes," I said. "Yes, you can stay with me." She hugged me tightly, and I held her thinking about cycles breaking and choices made, and the possibility that one honest relationship could be worth more than a dozen false ones. We stood there as the cemetery workers began filling in the grave two survivors of the same family system, choosing a different path forward. Together. Emma moved into my guest room on a semi-permanent basis, spending weekdays with Madison, but weekends and most holidays with me. We established routines: Saturday morning farmers market, Sunday afternoon financial literacy lessons, disguised as board games, evening walks, where she told me about school and friends and the normal 13-year-old concerns that had nothing to do with family trauma. Madison had started therapy after a court-mandated evaluation related to the fraud case, and according to Emma was trying, I guess. I didn't ask for details. Madison's journey was her own, and I'd learned that my peace didn't depend on her redemption. 1 year after that catastrophic phone call from Dad, I received an invitation to speak at TEDx Manhattan. The organizers had seen my viral TikTok and the foundation's work. They wanted me to talk about family financial abuse, the hidden epidemic, as they called it. I almost declined. Public speaking terrified me. But then I thought about all the messages I'd received over the past year, hundreds of people saying, "I thought I was the only one," and "Thank you for making me feel less alone." And I accepted. The talk was titled "The Hidden Price of Family Loyalty." I stood on that red circle looking out at the audience and told my story without names, but with devastating clarity. I explained the manipulation tactics, the guilt weaponization, the slow erosion of boundaries that makes victims complicit in their own exploitation. I talked about the shame that keeps people silent and the courage required to say no to people you're supposed to love unconditionally. "Family loyalty is beautiful," I said near the end. "But it should never cost you your dignity, your financial security, or your sense of self. And if someone demands those things as proof of your love, they're not asking for loyalty, they're demanding submission." The talk went viral within days. 3 million views, then 5, then 10. The Eleanor Foundation's donation page crashed from traffic. Survivor advocacy groups shared it. Therapists assigned it to clients. Law schools used it in courses on family law and financial crimes. Emma watched it on my laptop, tears streaming down her face. "You're helping so many people, Aunt Jo." "We're helping them," I corrected. "You started this by choosing honesty. I just finished it." On the anniversary of Dad's phone call, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I returned to Paradise Cove Resort. Not with family, but alone, paying my own way with money I'd earned and saved without anyone's access but mine. I sat on the same beach where everything had unraveled and rebuilt, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. My phone held messages from people I'd helped through the foundation, a photo of Emma's straight-A report card, and a saved voicemail from Mom. I played sometimes when I needed to hear her voice. I wasn't the same person who'd arrived here a year ago, desperate for family approval, willing to fund their comfort at the cost of my own dignity. I was whole now, not because they'd finally valued me, but because I'd learned to value myself. I pulled out my journal, the one I'd started keeping at my therapist's suggestion, and wrote, "1 year ago today, Dad called and demanded I join a family trip. He charged $28,000 to my card without asking. It felt like theft. It was theft. But what I got back was priceless myself. My voice, my boundaries, my freedom. Mom, I finally understand what you meant in that video. I'm not obligated to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I can choose myself without guilt. I can demand respect without apology. I can walk away from people who hurt me even when they share my blood. I'm free. Finally, completely, joyfully free. And it only cost me everything I thought was family to gain everything that actually matters. Thank you for protecting me even from beyond the grave. Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't require sacrifice of self. Thank you for showing me that peace is possible. I'm free, Mom. I'm finally free." I closed the journal and watched the sun disappear into the ocean, feeling lighter than I had in 37 years. The past was behind me. The future was mine. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Joanna's story didn't end with revenge. It ended with reclaiming herself. She walked away from a family that valued her wallet over her worth, and in doing so, she found something they could never give her: peace. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept less than you deserve, even when that refusal costs you everything you thought was family. Her mother's final gift wasn't money, it was permission to choose herself without guilt. And that permission changed everything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt used by people who claim to love you, or if you believe that accountability matters more than keeping the peace, drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts. Have you experienced family financial abuse? How did you find the courage to set boundaries? And if this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel for more true stories about people who chose themselves over toxicity. Hit that like button if Joanna's journey inspired you, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away from family that hurts you. Your story matters. Your boundaries matter. You matter. Thank you for listening to Joanna's journey. Until next time, remember, family isn't an excuse for exploitation, and love should never cost you your dignity.